across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Well, what a morning it is. I know you're a bit confused because it's a Friday and I'm here, but yes, I am indeed here. Julia Hartley-Brewer here on Talk, the home of common sense, all the way until 1 o'clock. I thought, you know what, I'd be interested to work on the morning after the by-election at Gorton and Denton, because it might well be an interesting result. Will Reform win? Will the Greens win? And I thought, as soon as I said, oh, I'll be in on Friday, I thought, you know what's going to happen? It's going to be a really dull result, and it's going to be like a small majority in a Labour hold. Well, couldn't have been more wrong, eh? It has been a Green Party victory. The 5th Green MP to be elected, that's Hannah Spencer. First by-election victory for the Green Party. Their first MP in the North, with a majority of, wait for it, 4,400 over the... forget the Labour candidate, Reform candidate, Matt Goodwin. Labour pushed to 3rd place. Tories and Lib Dems nowhere to be seen. The Tories lost their deposit. That's how badly they did in what has been one of Labour's safest seats. Well, the enjoyment and the celebrations for the Green Party will be going on, I imagine, for some days and weeks. The recriminations and the soul-searching for the Labour Party will absolutely be going on for probably much longer than that. What does this tell us about the future for the Prime Minister, for the Labour Party, for, well, any version of two-party politics in this country? Are we now into five-party politics, or have we heard that all before? Is this a flash in the pan for the Green Party? Or is this genuinely now the party on the left? If you don't want Reform, you don't want Labour, is that where you go to vote? And how big a challenge is it in particular to Reform? They're ahead in the polls still, but you know what? With that challenge on the left, could we see a lot of vote splitting and actually Reform not able to achieve what the polls have constantly been predicting they will do, which is win a majority at the next general election? It is all to play for. There is so much to talk about. I cannot wait to talk about it with you. So do get in touch. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is great to have you watching and listening, but it's even better if you get in touch. What is your reaction to that election results in Gorton and Denton in the early hours of this morning? What do you think this means for British politics? What do you feel about it? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text costs one standard network message. We're also going to be touching at some point, of course, on a few other stories, including... I'm going to have to really try hard not to swear. The criminal damage, the graffiti, the vandalism, the criminal action of the spray painting, once again, of the statue of Winston Churchill in Parliament Square. Horribly defaced. And just to let you know, a 38-year-old man has just been arrested on suspicion of racially aggravated criminal damage of the statue, where it was spray painted with red paint. Free Palestine, Zionist war criminal, never again is now, and globalise the Intifada. But just in case you were wondering this morning, no, we don't have sectarian politics in our country. Of course we don't. Anyway, joining me for all the chat right now, before we get to your phone calls, I'm delighted to say for the whole show's political journalist and commentator Henry Hill. Good morning once again to you.
Good morning.
I know you've been very busy since the early hours of this morning, following all of this and doing various interviews. I suppose first question, how significant is this vote? Because we've had lots of by-elections over the years, over the decades, and either new parties or sort of fringe parties doing really well in a mid-term by-election, and everyone goes, oh, this is the future. Politics has changed forever. Has it?
I mean, I think you've hinted at the real slightly boring answer, which is that we won't know until we see how everything pans out, right? You think about some of those SDP by-election wins in the 1980s. That was it. The mould was broken, and then all of a sudden it wasn't after all. I do think that this time it might be different because we've never before had both of the major parties seem to be in quite so deep a crisis at the same time, and both of them losing votes to left and right to two radical new parties. Normally it's been sort of one or the other.
Yeah.
And so it shows, I think, a few things. One, that for the Tories, the really bad thing about this, obviously losing your deposit is always embarrassing, but it's the fact that the Reform have now clearly established that they are perfectly capable of consolidating the right-wing vote where they are the leading party. And that means that the Tories, who for a very long time have been able to say, look, we're the right-wing party that can maybe...
At the end of the day, we're the one you're going to have to vote for if you don't want the others, yeah.
I think they're losing that, and that means that in any seat where the Tories have already been pushed behind Reform, they now face the prospect of having their vote squeezed. But it also shows that the one good thing that's happened for the Tories since 2024 was the election of Zach Polanski. Right, but seriously, because the Greens historically have done a bit of a Lib Dem thing, right, where they're two completely different parties in different bits of the country. In urban areas, they're this radical left-wing group, and in sort of rural areas, they're the Tories who like trees a bit more. Right, and so there were several seats.
But they're nice and cuddly.
Absolutely, and there were several seats where the Greens could potentially have picked off Tory seats for the next election. I think now that prospect has faded, and instead the Greens are turning into a much more potent threat to Labour. Yeah. And Labour have just been pushed into third place in their 50th safest seat.
I mean, that's the thing. This wasn't a seat that was really in the realms of the Greens realistically getting, or certainly Reform. I think it was the Reform parties, in terms of their target seats, 440th out of 650. So realistically, it was a big hope they would get it. But what's really interesting about this, I mean, we'll get to sort of what, the Green Party in Hannah Spencer and the winning candidate in just a moment. But in terms of for Keir Starmer, look, there's a lot of question marks being made, given now. Carl Turner, Labour MP, who's very, he's been on the show a lot, he's been on lots of media this morning, he's talking about this is a catastrophic result. But at the end of the day, there's this view that if Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, hadn't been stopped from running for the seat, he wants to return to Parliament to basically challenge Keir Starmer for the leadership, he would have won. If he'd been the candidate and he hadn't been blocked by Keir Starmer, very specifically, he would have won this seat. Now, I think that's a big question mark. He's a popular figure, he's a well-known figure in Manchester, and of course Gorton and Denton is in Manchester, Greater Manchester. I think, given the scale of anger against Keir Starmer at the moment, I would question that, but the decision was taken. Even if he won that by-election, we're going to then face an election for the Greater Manchester Mayor without the popular figure of Andy Burnham. But also the fact that they went completely for this sort of binary election campaign, which is it's us or Reform, and if you want to stop Reform, you've got to vote for us. They barely mentioned the Greens. Meanwhile, there are the Greens coming up on the left, absolutely knocking them out of the park. Almost 15,000 votes. And whereas the Reform Party got 10,500 votes. I mean,
essentially, Gorton and Denton is a very strange seat in that half of it is essentially a Labour Reform battleground and half of it is a Labour Green battleground. Yeah. And maybe, actually, if Labour had been a bit more shameless and they'd gone around the Reform bit being like, look, it's us or the Greens, right? It's us or those lunatics.
They did on two separate campaigns.
Right, but they actually can't... and I think this is a big problem for Labour, is that despite the threat that Reform still does pose to them, and I think there are some people saying, actually, the real problems the Greens know, both of them are serious threats, they just can't bring themselves to campaign at Reform voters. But I think on the Burnham thing, one, you're completely right about the fact that if he had stood, I think he probably would have won, not for certain, but no. They'd have had that mayoral vacancy. But two, what would that have changed? We'd have had a government which only won a by-election by essentially running a candidate who was an anti-prime ministerial candidate in the seat. And also, Andy Burnham doesn't have any answers, right? I think this is the important thing to remember. Andy Burnham, it's easy to be popular when you're a devolved politician who does not have responsibility for pensions, the NHS, social care, immigration.
Spend more on this or that, Prime Minister. Yeah.
The public, if Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister, the public will go off him just as quickly as they've gone off Sir Keir Starmer.
Well, he did. The other interesting thing is this move from everybody, it's the unions or backbench MPs saying the answer is you've got to go to the left. Labour have been, they say, lurching to the right. I've yet to see any evidence of this, but lurching to the right to take on Reform. They say, no, the answer is actually going to the left. But this is the thing. The Tories face this challenge from the right, from Reform. Labour are facing a challenge from Reform on the right and from the Greens on the left. They are being squeezed absolutely down the middle.
Absolutely. This is the thing. Whenever someone says, actually, you see this a lot since last night's results, like they've been focusing on Reform and actually they should be focusing on the Greens. It's like, no. The Greens are a serious problem, but Reform is still a serious problem. But the other thing is, people forget about the Tories, understandably.
Well, they did. They did at this election. They lost their deposits.
This is, I went to University of Manchester. Manchester Gorton has never been a seat where the Tories really feature. But if you think about it, there's a lot of voters, centrist voters, who voted Tory in 2019 and switched to Labour in 2024. The more Labour pivots left to focus on the Green Party, not only does it risk alienating voters to reform, but it also risks alienating voters in those sort of shirey seats that it won last time.
Absolutely. Just some breaking news in relation to Manchester, and it was something that was brought up by, even in the speech actually, that Hannah Spencer gave the winning Green candidate in the by-election. Darren Connor, who's 55 years old, has been charged with possession of an offensive weapon and possession of Class B drugs. This is after reports of a man armed with an axe entered Manchester Central Mosque during Ramadan prayers. That's according to Greater Manchester Police. Big concern about that. Thankfully, no one hurt. Let's have a watch and a listen of Hannah Spencer. She's, you know, working class, plumber, local girl, absolutely lovely. For some reason, has a haircut of a 5-year-old girl. I'm sorry, I know. I mean, all people in the world to talk about their hair. Me, I mean, come on.
I can't.
But you know, you can. But I mean, I'm sure if you did have more hair, you'd style it better than her and me. But I do just it's like I just don't understand. You're a grown lady in your 30s. Why you got a hairdo like you're 5? But anyway, she gave a victory speech, and this is what Hannah Spencer had to say.
Working hard. What does that get you? Because talk to anyone here and they will tell you. The people who work hard but can't put food on the table, can't get their kids' school uniforms, can't put their heating on, can't live off the pension they worked hard to save for, can't even begin to dream about ever having a holiday, ever. Because life has changed. Instead of working for a nice life, we're working to line the pockets of billionaires.
I mean, it just ticked every box there, didn't it, Henry? Working to line the pockets of billionaires. And this is interesting. She was, you know, local girl, you know, made good. A lot of talk about, actually, you know, she's a plumber. But, you know, is she a bit of a hypocrite? She's, you know, she drives a petrol car. She goes away on, you know, foreign holidays when green policies are opposed to both those things. They're also opposed to private landlords and second homeowners. And she's a second homeowner. Her mum helped her buy her first home. You kind of got to wonder about you know, how consistent these people are. But I mean, when she says, what does working hard get you? The reality is, of course, the green policies. And if you haven't had a look, have a look at my Twitter feed. We've got a column in The Sun today. I think it's a good thing that this election victory has come to the Greens. I genuinely think it's a good thing. The reason why I think it is, rather than any other party winning, is it's a wake-up call to everyone about who the Greens are, because this, to me, is exactly the same as the BNP doing well in European elections with Nick Griffin becoming an MEP back in 2009. And there was an absolute outcry when they decided to invite him on Question Time, the BBC. And everyone go, this is awful, it'll just boost support for him. No, it didn't. When people actually saw him, they heard his views, they actually looked at BNP policies. OK, they did better in the 2010 general election than they'd done in the 2005 general election, but it was still about 1 or 2%, and then they didn't win any seats and they completely collapsed. What we need for the Green Party is to stop treating them like they're some nice little tree huggers in the corner. They are a dangerous bunch. I call them communists on ketamine. That is what they are. They are a dangerous bunch of extremists. We have this talk about all our extremist policies in this parties in this country. The Greens are an extremist party. Their immigration policy, no borders, no deportations. Anyone who wants to come here can come here and get a free home and be given universal basic income. Wealth taxes, well, the money's gone within 5 minutes, folks. Net zero, not by 2050, unachievable, unaffordable, undesirable, by 2040. That will only be done by you ain't allowed to fly, you ain't allowed to drive a car, you ain't allowed to eat meat, you can't heat your home with central heating you've got right now. Legalising all drugs, including heroin. I mean, this is properly insane stuff. Legalising prostitution. Basically completely anti-Israel policies, Gaza and Palestine, completely and utterly aligning themselves with the most bitter, dangerous sectarian politics in this country, which is, I would say, the pro-Palestinian, supposedly, it's actually just anti-Israel, anti-Jew movement in this country. What do you make of the claims that Nigel Farage said that this result was a victory for sectarian voting and cheating? After we had the claims from and it was an independent body. They were allowed to stand in polling stations because, they are literally allowed to do that because they are an independent body. And they, watching what was going on, they said, and this is Democracy Volunteers, that they've seen the highest levels of family voting at an election in our 10-year history of observing elections in the UK. So they're there watching and they're seeing they're seeing basically more than one family member going into a voting booth, pulling the curtain, and the vote is happening. Now, that is a criminal offence in this country. We're told by the people running these election stations, polling stations, that that's not what happened. But they have 2 observers in each station, and they said it happened at the majority of stations, and basically they ain't seen nothing like it.
So, obviously, there's no reason, prima facie, to not take democracy volunteers seriously. They are a respected independent group. They're run by an academic, and they're allowed in by the Electoral Commission. They're not some crank group of people who just turn up at polling stations.
Yeah, you wouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the interesting thing about this is that the family voting in polling stations is simply a small part of the problem that, for a very long time, has been postal votes.
Yes.
Right? Because postal voting was originally a very, very rare thing, and it was for invalids and people who literally couldn't leave the house, servicemen,
people who are travelling,
servicemen overseas and so on. And now it's just become it's more convenient, right? But there's no secret ballot in the home, right? And so I think that actually what surprises me about this, and to be fair, I've not read in full Democracy Volunteers report. I don't want to make too definitive a claim about it, but what surprises me about this is just that these people are bothering to go and do it at the polling station.
Yeah.
Actually, because it's so easy now, in the way that we conduct our democracy, to do this kind of thing at home. I do think it's concerning that Manchester Council's staff are flatly contradicting democracy.
And Nigel Farage is saying this was happening in Muslim areas. Now, Gorton is where there's a large Muslim population and student population, and Denton. These 2 seats have almost nothing in common, and Denton is more of a sort of older, white working class population, and that's where it's happening. But the reality is, I've been covering elections for a very, very long time. In every single, whether it's a by-election, a council election, a general election, where we have seen worth taking serious allegations of either postal vote anomalies or this sort of, coercing, should we say, organising of how people in your family vote, people, the dead voting, whatever. Invariably, it's in Labour seats, and it's in seats which have a very high population who their heritage is from the Indian subcontinent. So it's not just, people say it's Muslims, it's not Muslims, it's Pakistanis, it's Indians, it's Bangladeshis. Now, why is that an issue? It's because these are 3 countries that ostensibly have democracy, but massively corrupt democracies, where corruption is absolutely the norm, where sectarian voting is absolutely the norm, where the head of the family directing how you vote, absolutely the norm. And that has simply been imported to our country. Now, people can say, oh, that's racist. No, if it was a load of Australians doing it, I'd call it out just the same. The problem exists in particular areas for a particular reason, and it is entirely related to importing corrupt practices from other countries. And if we're not going to recognise that, you're not going to call it out, we're not going to be able to deal with it. I want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to take a quick break. More from Henry Hill. We'll be hearing from you. We'll also be hearing from Talk reporter Samara Gill up there in Manchester. This is Talk.
We genuinely are on resignation watch. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson, who faces a criminal investigation.
Can Keir Starmer survive the Mandelson scandal? We have breaking news for you. We've just been talking about, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff. We've now had another resignation from Number 10. Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, Tim Allen, has now also resigned. The plot is thickening. The noose is tightening.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go live to Manchester right now to our Talk reporter, Samara Gill, who's been covering the by-election result for us. Very, very good morning to you, Samara. Outside, not raining. That's always a good sign. Zach Polanski, the Green Party leader, has just started a victory rally in Manchester after that, let's face it, astounding victory. But what's the mood like there?
Yeah, it's as you say, you know, the sun's coming up, and I think it's a wake-up call for Labour and also sections of the right as to just how prolific the Green Party has become. I think on the ground, having spoken to people this morning, you know, the Green Party's campaigns completely punctured the public narrative. I was speaking to Deliveroo drivers that were saying Reform was going to deport them if elected. I was speaking to nurses who were saying that, you know, if a Conservative party was to come in or anything even like Labour, that they would be taxed even higher, which is funny because the Greens have very high tax rates in their sort of formal policies. But I've got a lot of women that I spoke to who said this is a massive win for women, which is very interesting considering Mothin Ali, yes, Mothin Ali, the deputy, I mean, his wife wears a full niqab. So it's very interesting on the ground here. Everyone seems to be pleased about the Greens win.
Well, everyone who voted for them, I imagine. But that's what's so fascinating, is this extraordinary alliance from the sort of the tree-huggy left, so-called progressive views on various things and tax the wealthy and all of that, which the students in the Gorton area would have loved. And then you've also got this large, almost 30% Muslim vote, which clearly came out in force yesterday in the by-election, where, you know, got this issue of Gaza apparently seemed to be the biggest thing. Extraordinary scenes yesterday where not the British flag, not the Union flag or the England flag flying when the campaigners for the Greens roundabout, but the flag for Palestine and the flag for Pakistan flying. I mean, what do you make of the sectarian side of things? Because that has caused a massive stir.
It really has. And you can see with Zach Polanski coming out and saying things like Zionism is racism, exactly who he was chasing. They were very, very smart in who they were targeting and how they were doing it. They went after that younger vote that is obsessed with socialism and craven for it. And then they also went out after the Muslim vote, which, you know, we've already had issues there with, as we said, you know, people bringing their families potentially into booths and influencing the vote, the way that they said that Reform might deport people, you know, they really went there. And then, of course, we had that now infamous Urdu ad that they used. They were not playing around. They knew exactly the voter bases to go for and how to chase them. And this is a result that can only be thanked to them for that, because it's just ridiculous in some way how they were allowed to get away with some of these tactics.
Well, it did. I mean, again, I've seen the Labour Party, I've seen the Tories do quite a lot of that as well, but the Green Party press conference just this moment, Zach Polanski, the leader, has who interestingly, of course, isn't an MP himself. He was asked at the time, why did you not stand in this by-election? He's an Assembly member in London, but he started off by hailing the victory as a seismic victory, and his new MP, Hannah Spencer, says the constituents of Gorton and Denton have, in her words, rejected hate and embraced hope. But I mean, most of it was about Gaza, and you know, I say sectarian politics. You mentioned that campaign video that went out in Urdu, which clearly aimed at the Pakistani Muslim vote. And again, we live in Britain. The campaign videos should be in English. In Wales, you can have them in Welsh. That's it. There's no other language they should be in. But that clearly sort of tried to play against prejudices. You know, they had photographs of Keir Starmer with Modi. the Indian leader, and of course with Netanyahu, the Israeli leader, clearly playing in that sectarian division. In terms of the feeling today, I mean, at the end of the day with by-elections, we all get very excited about these things. The majority of people, nevertheless, don't actually bother voting in by-elections. They had a turnout, what, 45%? Same as the last general election. Is there a mood of sort of, you know, that, oh, thank God that's all over in Manchester today? Or have a lot of people, frankly, not really noticed?
It's a really good point. About 50% of the people that I've spoken to today didn't even know there was an election on.
There you go.
And weren't even aware that anything was happening in the city. And when I said to them, well, you know, Greens won last night, they went, oh, OK, I think that's a good thing. That was genuinely a 50% response. So you can see that there is a bit of a bubble that I think we shouldn't get lost in. And it is kind of just business as usual over here. Yes, the Greens will have some sort of effect. But I have to say, Hannah Spencer as a candidate is kind of a maverick. Zach Polanski's going to have to come up with a lot more of those types if he wants to keep winning. But this is a very specific constituency, one that's very suited to a Green Party candidate. And yes, we should be scared. But I think, you know, they're probably likely to have, what, 12 MPs maybe in the next election. This is a very sort of, this is a microcosm, but it's not something we should look at
Zach
for the rest of the country.
was saying possibly up to 100, but actually, again, the seats where they could appeal, really not in those sort of numbers. Really good to get you on. Thank you very much, Samara Gill, talk reporter. Let's go to the phone lines. Lots of you on the phone. 0344 499 1000 to give us your reaction to that election result. Matthew is in Warrington. Hello, Matthew. What do you want to say?
Hi, Julia. First, before I go on about the election, I've just seen a picture of what they've done to Winston Churchill.
I know.
It's horrific.
It's genuinely, I had a visceral reaction to that. I'm so angry about that.
I feel I've got a tear in my eye because it's awful.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry about that. I got up this morning. First thing, I've got up at 4:30 for work, and I thought, you know what, I'll have a look, see what the result was. So I was seeing the 4,000 for the Green Party more than I was really taken back by that. It was a bit of a wake-up call for me. I thought, where did that come from? I thought it was going to be a lot closer.
Yeah.
I thought Reform was going to pip it. But in hindsight, I hope it's a good thing, really, because they have done all right, because it is a Labour struggle, so they've still got 10,000, even though they've worked really hard for it. And I hope now that the mainstream media put Zach to ransom now.
Thank you.
Asking him some serious questions, because I don't know what Reform stands for. Sorry, not Reform, Green Party. I haven't got a clue. Green.
That's it. People are going, oh, well, I may not have voted for them, but they're the nice people. If you look at their policies, they are dangerous and insane.
And all these LGBT members of Green who are voting for the Muslim vote, I tell you what, you go over to Gaza and tell Hamas that you're LGBT, you'll be finding yourself parachuting off a rooftop.
Good luck with that. It is the most bizarre thing, the link between those two groups, isn't it? Matthew, thank you very much indeed. Matthew in Warrington there. Let's get texts and tweets coming in as well. Peter says the UK is done. There you go. Oh, that's fair enough. The Greens has Manchester lost its mind, said Darren. David says this is a wake-up call that was needed. It shows the state of British politics. Donna says if the Green surge continues, we're finished as a country. Wit says this shows that Reform UK are finished. They are no longer the party of Brits. 2029 will be Restore versus the Greens. I mean, it won't, but carry on. I mean, it just won't. I mean, this battle of egos between a bunch of men who all fallen out with each other, who can basically split the difference, on a pin with what they disagree on. It's insane. Sam says, I hope people realise that the Greens are a Trojan horse for dangerous Islamism. Yep. And Sarah says it means Reform lost. It's that simple. Sheena says we're in trouble if this carries on. Will the family voting be investigated too? Yeah, this calls for a police investigation into that. Henry Hill, political journalist and commentator, still with me. Before we go to a break, I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary, this result, and the Greens are totally entitled to celebrate. But at the end of the day, if you look at the analysis, people say, oh, it's five-party politics now, it's this and that, and all. But at the end of the day, we've had these big results before, as we were talking about earlier, and it doesn't necessarily always translate. You can have lots of focus on one seat if you're a small party. The Lib Dems did this for years. When you've got a general election and you're actually trying to compete in the seats where you don't have that high, for instance, a Muslim sectarian vote, where you don't have, say, big student population voting, it's a very, very different thing.
Yeah, I think the advantage you have as a small party in a by-election is that, one, it's only one contest, which means you can throw all your resources at it. Whereas when you're contesting all 650 seats, the big parties, they just are able to do more seats well, ideally, than the smaller parties.
Feet on the ground.
And you know, as you say, the Liberal Democrat Orpington was going to change British politics forever, all the way back in the 60s, right? This great liberal breakthrough, right? We have had this before. Now, it is true that currently our party system is more fragmented than ever it has been, but I think you're right to point out that there is an extent to which the Greens are just doing what the Liberal Democrats used to do, right? They're filling that role for people. And ultimately, unless we get a change in our electoral system, I think that we will end up back at something resembling two-party politics. Maybe not the same parties.
The end of it has been predicted so many times.
But it's fragmented before.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking more about that sectarian vote. We're going to be talking more about the allegations of basically, voter fraud. Well, not vote fraud, but illegal, actions. And also that outrageous defacing of Churchill's statue in Westminster. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:34 is the time. We are, of course, talking about that Green Party, let's face it, stunning victory in the Gorton and Denton by-election there in Manchester. Although, having spoken to our reporter up there, most people didn't even know there was a by-election on. And that is the reality. We're the weirdos being obsessed with this stuff. But what does it tell us about British politics? Has it changed? Are we now in a five-party political state? Does this mean that Zach Polanski is the big driving force on the left of British politics? Not Keir Starmer and probably not. Do you remember him? Jeremy Corbyn, who is now the official leader of your party. They're still in existence. Let's talk about all of this now with Dr. Ashok Kumar. He's a Green Party activist and associate professor at Birkbeck University. Very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
You look very, very happy. Tell us what your reaction was to that result.
I just listening to this is just making me laugh so much. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a seismic win. I mean, there's no denying that. This was Labour's 38th safest seat and it's Green's 127th target seat.
Yep.
And yet we won with 30% spare, 4,500 votes.
Yep.
So it's a big win, and I think it's pretty transformative potentially.
In what way?
In the sense that, you have a party that has been hegemonic, the Labour Party on the left. And here it's very, very clear that a party that's articulating a clear politics around nationalizing water and energy and transport, stopping wars, protecting the NHS, bringing down water bills. The key bread and butter issues has won. And that's the real take-home message from today is that, Green Party isn't the Green Party of yesteryear. It's a party that speaks to wider layers of society, not just environmental issues, and that message came through.
I mean, you say people talking about things like nationalisation, and actually very, very popular policy, actually across the board in terms of British politics, not just on the left. But that wasn't what the Green Party campaigned on. They've been accused of campaigning on sectarian grounds. And of course, we had that campaign video and leaflets going out in Urdu. You know, photographs of Keir Starmer meeting with the Indian Prime Minister Modi and with Netanyahu. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what that's got remotely to do with the people of Gorton and Denton. And I don't think it's anything to do with the, you know, cost of living and the sort of meat and potato issues that a lot of people in this constituency, where, you know, life is not going well for an awful lot of people. It's a very poor constituency. Why that would be relevant? It seems to me that was not the reason why the Green Party won.
Well, I mean, firstly, having language-based political broadcast and advertising is part of British political culture. I mean,
is it?
If you go back to the East End, there was advertisement by the Labour Party, you know, 70 years ago in Yiddish, 80 years ago in Yiddish. It's in Bengali.
Yeah, totally disapprove of that.
Right now.
This is Britain. We have our language is English. If you're in Wales, there's also the official language of Welsh. Those are the only languages anyone should be campaigning in, surely, on the basis that if you can't speak the language, how the hell have you got a vote?
It's not that they can't speak the language, it's that English is a second language for many people in this country. And what it tells people when you do an advert in Urdu and Bengali is that you're speaking to that community. And that's okay. It's not illegal. There's no campaign violations.
I think it should be illegal. I know it's not illegal.
That's your opinion?
Yeah, but I think it should be.
I mean, there's nothing new here, right? This is the Labour Party, the Lib Dems. I don't know about the Tories. Maybe the Tories have done it in some places, but I don't really know. But it's been done for decades and decades, and it's not been an issue until, you know, the Labour Party lost to a more left-wing party. You know, and it's not, you know, in those advertisements, it's important to talk about what they actually said. You know, in the videos, they were talking about rents, they were talking about bills, they were talking about the NHS, they were talking about the core issues, they were talking about war, they were talking about Gaza. They're talking about core issues that people care about.
How is Gaza a core issue at a by-election in Manchester?
Well, you know, British supplies arms, surveils, and provides diplomatic cover to Israel. That makes it a British issue. You know, if
it's less than 1%. I don't think. I believe
tax. You're not here to regulate what people care about. People care about that, and that's what.
No, I'm just asking how. How is that? How is Gaza a key issue for voters in Manchester?
It is because people care about human rights.
People care about human rights.
It doesn't matter. Our care for human rights doesn't stop at our border. We care about human rights.
Well, why weren't they talking about Iran? Why was Iran? We've just had 40,000 people slaughtered in Iran. Why did they care about human rights? Why would they? Why would they not post this about Iran?
You should go out there and ask people.
Well, but you know the answer because this was sectarian campaigning.
I'll answer that. British government has full sanctions against Iran. We are complicit in the Gaza genocide. That's the distinction.
Okay.
Is the distinction. We stand by people who have arrest warrants out for war crimes. We give them diplomatic cover. We don't do that in Iran. That's the distinction.
That's the distinction. That's the key thing. It's got nothing to do with Israel.
Directly, it has everything to do with Israel. Israel and Britain are hand in glove. Iran and Britain aren't. That's the distinction. It's our role, our government's role.
It's our government's role.
Do you not see that?
I think there is that. I think there is that distinction, Ashok. But I don't think that is the reason why the left in this country is obsessed with Gaza. And by the way, we've had the new Green MP accusing Israel of genocide and war crimes. There's no evidence for either of these things. And I know you're going to say United Nations and International Court. There is no evidence there is a genocide going on or has been a genocide in Gaza. The giveaway is Hamas's own numbers about how many people have died, which tell you categorically that has not been the case. But this is the thing. The obsession with Gaza, this is the thing I think a lot of us don't understand who are not on that left side of politics, is how you get people who claim they feel incredibly strongly. And again, we've got, you know, a gay leader of this party, gay vegan, you know, cares desperately about...
Jewish.
Jewish. Yeah, it's Jewish. Cares desperately about so-called progressive issues, like believes that, you know, some women have a penis, believes in trans rights, Mr. Progressive, and at the same time allying with the most extremist Islamist cause, which would, frankly, throw throw probably, well, Hannah would be in a burqa, and Zach Polanski would be thrown off the top of a building for his sexuality. Why is this really strange alliance caught on the left? It doesn't make sense to most of us.
Well, look, there's a lot of different issues that people care about. You know, nobody, I mean, there was some claims that, you know, the Green Party hid away their views on decriminalizing drugs, or they hid away their positions on trans issues. That's just simply not true. I mean, if you looked at the advertisements in Gorton and Denton, it was everywhere.
Not the ones in Urdu. Legalizing heroin wasn't in the Urdu campaign video.
People were fully aware of the Green Party's position.
No, they weren't. Most people wouldn't have a clue. Most people wouldn't have a clue.
Okay, well, we have a difference of opinion on that, but
no, I'm telling you factually, most people wouldn't have a clue.
People care. People can hold two things at the same time.
Can they, if those two things are mutually exclusive?
More people care about war crimes more than, and it's possible for them to care more about war crimes than bathrooms, gender-neutral bathrooms or whatever. So that's possible. It's not because people are ignorant, and that might just be what you think and what your stereotypical mind thinks.
I have a funny feeling that most Muslims in Gorton voting for the Green Party were not aware of the legalising prostitution, legalising all drugs, including heroin, and teaching children in primary school how to take drugs safely. I don't think they would have been aware of any of that.
Well, I think that's a bit of a caricature of the Green Party policy.
Those are platforms. Yeah, those are internal party documents.
No, it isn't to teach children how to take heroin. It's to have drug education and to not have criminal gangs controlling drugs. That actually you have a system in which regulation and you don't criminalize.
Actually, the policy is to work with the criminal gangs.
It's actually to work with the criminal gangs.
That's how insane it is.
Rather than criminalizing them.
No, that's well. You need to read up on the party policy of the party.
No, this is the party policy, and this is a policy that's been used in other places. We have some of the highest deaths from drug use in Europe, and you want to continue the same policies. And this is saying, no, let's take an evidence-based approach.
I don't want to continue the same policies. I'm zero tolerance on drugs.
It's been used in other places.
Okay, let me ask you about the claims we've had from election observers allowed into the polling stations because they're independent, and they say that they have seen some of the worst, what they call family voting, the highest levels of family voting at any election in our 10-year history of observing elections in the UK. This is when more than one family member goes into the polling booth, has the curtain pulled when they vote. Now, this is illegal. You're not allowed to do this. This should be stopped by those working the polling stations. Big question mark about why this was not stopped. Now, Nigel Farage has said that this was a victory, this vote for the Greens. A victory, he says, for sectarian voting, which we've just discussed, and cheating. Was there cheating?
No, I mean, absolutely not. I mean, there's no complaints during the polling. There was no evidence from staff. Even the 15 couples that they discussed, did this. Was brought forth by a totally confected group of democracy volunteers.
What do you say? I don't know what you mean. A confected group?
It was confected.
It's an organisation that for 10 years has been observing elections, and they're allowed in the polling station.
There's no. The returning officer said that there's no evidence of this being the case, and it's also just a bit patronizing. The idea that Muslim women need to be instructed how to vote. These are doctors. These are lawyers. These are teachers. These are business owners. They made a political choice. You don't like it, and it's like when you're in school and you beat someone fair and square. They start crying and screaming and throwing a tantrum and making up confected things. Like, this is what we're finding. And the other side, what you found is that the Labour Party created fake websites about tactical voting, created fake data, distributed leaflets that were a direct violation. That there was a complaint to the police. They published fabricated polling data. They ran the most maligned, most embarrassing campaign, and yet they're accusing the Green Party, who ran a very decent campaign.
A very decent campaign. I will say dirty tricks on all sides. Just finally, what does this tell us about reform and their chances? Because a lot of people were expecting it would be a reform victory. And it's very interesting, actually, how much all the Labour policy, all the Labour tactics and all the campaign literature was all about reform. It's us a reform. We're the only party that can stop reform. They didn't even mention the Greens in most of their literature. Certainly not. They had bar charts of just the two parties. And then we see reform pushed into second place, just above the Tories, but good whack behind, 4,500 votes behind the Green Party. What does this tell us about the future of reform?
Look, I think the reform is speaking to a constituency of people that are genuinely disgusted at how the economy is treating them, about wages, about being disenfranchised economically, politically, in every single way. And the Labour Party has made it worse. And the Tories haven't done anything about it. I mean, they got 600 votes at this. They're going to lose their deposit first time since 1983. So the Green Party is offering another route, not one that doesn't just simply, blame migrants, and it actually says there is inequality in society. We want a wealth tax. We want more distribution of wealth. And we believe that the wealth that's produced in this country, whether it's water, whether it's transport, whether it's energy, belongs to the people, not to private companies and making billions for shareholders. And I think that speaks to the same constituency of people. Politics doesn't run from left to right on a line with Labour in the middle. It's more complicated.
It certainly is. And it's just got a lot more complicated. Always good to talk to you, Dr. Ashok Kumar, Green Party activist and Associate Professor at Birkbeck University. Very happy to have Ashok on. Couldn't get any of the Green Party officials to come on. I don't know why. I keep saying, Zach Polanski, come on, mate, come on. What's to fear? I mean, just because I wrote soft soap, you're like a little cuddly Labrador like everyone else has been doing until now. Henry Hill, political journalist and commentator, listening to that, fascinating. But just as he was speaking, just been handed, I think, really good news. Hamid Koskan, he is the man who burnt a Quran outside the Turkish consulate. He has won his landmark blasphemy case at the High Court. Remember, he was convicted after holding up a burning copy of the book and shouting F Islam. He said it's a political protest, which it was. He is himself a refugee from Turkey over the fact that he is not he says it's the Islamification of that country. It's why he had to leave. He got prosecuted initially on a blasphemy charge, which doesn't exist. He gets prosecuted. He appealed. He overturned the conviction. And then extraordinarily, the CPS decided to appeal that appeal and using our money, by the way, at the High Court. But he has actually won on the basis that his actions were not criminal. It was not disorderly conduct. Need to remember, by the way, the man who attacked him with a knife saying, "I'm going to kill you," on camera, repeatedly trying to stab at him, did not even get a prison sentence. But this is a victory for freedom and for British values, isn't it, Henry?
I mean, it's also just a quite basic victory for the rule of law, because whether or not you think that we should have a blasphemy law in this country, I hope we can all agree that if we have one, Parliament should pass it, and it shouldn't be made up by the prosecuting authorities, right? Because I don't want to live in a country where the CPS can essentially just invent charges and then...
We had a vote in Parliament to end having blasphemy laws, and that's for all religions in this country.
Exactly.
We don't have a made-up one which they get, and it's the fact that the proof in the original case, the proof the judge said was that it had been disorderly conduct, that it had been provocative, was the fact that someone tried to kill him. That was literally... So basically, if you're angry about someone burning your religious text, if you try and kill them, you can basically make that ensures that they have committed a crime. That is so dangerous and terrifying. A, that judge needs to be taken off to the funny farm, and B, we have a de facto blasphemy law in this country because we're all terrified of having death threats against us if people did choose to exercise their legal right to burn any religious book. But it's only one religious book that would be an issue with. But again, as a general rule, I think people shouldn't be burning other people's religious books. I think that's or books at all. But you have a right to do it, and if you have a right to do it, you shouldn't get a criminal conviction for it. End of. Simple as that. 10:50 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. I want to hear all your thoughts on all the big stories we're talking about, including the defacing of the Winston Churchill statue, including this Koran burner, and also up next we are going to be talking about Hillary Clinton and today Bill Clinton giving evidence over the Epstein files. This is Talk.
We genuinely are on resignation watch. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson, who faces a criminal investigation.
Can Keir Starmer survive the Mandelson scandal? We have breaking news for you. We've just been talking about, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff. We've now had another resignation from Number 10. And Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, Tim Allen, has now also resigned. The plot is thickening. The noose is tightening.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:52 is the time. Just to let you know, the Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, still, last time I looked, Keir Starmer is going to be doing a pooled interview, and we'll get that to you as soon as we can, what his reaction is to that extraordinary Green result in the Gorton and Denton by-election. First up, though, let's turn our attentions to what's been going on overseas, particularly in America, in Washington, where Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State, gave evidence yesterday on video, but in a closed session with a congressional committee looking into the Epstein files. Today, her husband, Bill Clinton, former US president, will be giving evidence about what he knew when and what about Jeffrey Epstein, on whose private jet he flew many times, and an awful lot of photographs of him as well in the jacuzzis and the like in those Epstein files. Well, let's talk about this with Errol Moorcoach. He's the spokesman for Republicans Overseas UK. Very good morning to you, Errol.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Doesn't sound like, from what Hillary Clinton has had to say, certainly, since her hearing yesterday, that there was much to learn from Hillary Clinton. As she kept pointing out, I've never met Jeffrey Epstein, not been to his island, not been to his home, not quite sure what information I can give you, but we should get more out of today's evidence with Bill. Is that right?
I think we should get more out of Bill, and I guess in Miss Clinton's defense, she was probably not Jeffrey Epstein's target audience on either side of the aisle. And that's just, I mean, it not an offensive thing. I'm not trying to be rude, but there's that element. And then the second factor of it, she did mention that she only knew Ghislaine Maxwell because she attended her daughter's wedding.
Yeah.
And it was a +1. And I was like, okay, it's a +1. I understand that. I mean, maybe that's tangential. Probably, though, Bill Clinton didn't really advertise his behaviors strongly to her, especially after his behavior in the White House. So I can give Ms. Clinton a pass here and say perhaps she really was kept out of the loop.
Yeah, indeed. Bill Clinton definitely not out of the loop. Now, he said there's been no wrongdoing. He flew on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet. Sounds to me, I mean, I'm like the only person who didn't go on his jet. But that was, for his charitable foundation work and the like. But there's no doubt at all there's been lots of allegations against Bill Clinton over the years. Some rather obviously proven. As you mentioned, you touched on Monica Lewinsky. Lots of other allegations over the years, and there's a lot of feeling that he does have questions to answer. But then the claim from the Clintons is that they're being questioned, but so also should Donald Trump, who's claimed he's been exonerated by these Epstein files and the publication. But we know they haven't been published in full. There's been an awful lot that has not been released, and particularly some particular pages in relation to one of the young women who claims that as an underage girl, she was trafficked to Donald Trump.
I certainly think that there's a fair argument to argue that subpoenas need to be put for Republicans and Democrats. If this is just simply bringing Democrats up in front of this tribunal, I think it isn't appropriate, because there are Republicans in that document, and they should be held to task, the same as Mr. Clinton is going to be. In the case of President Trump, though, he never went to the island, and I think that's a huge differentiator. I mean, Bill Clinton went not just once, not just twice, but multiple times. And in addition to that, the argument that they're there for raising money. I mean, it's a little bit better of an argument than Bill Gates, who's worth $60 billion, trying to raise money from Jeffrey Epstein. It's like me trying to raise money from the smoothie shop guy. It's ridiculous. Bill Clinton, maybe there was some argument for one or two emissions. Okay, you go over there, you kind of say, hey, this isn't what I'm looking for, or this kind of a weird thing. But you're going tens and tens of times, and you're obviously somebody who has a proclivity for certain bad behaviors. So I think he really needs to answer the questions in a much more direct way than President Trump, who's exonerated in almost any capacity regarding the island. Now, after he's president in a Democrat Congress, could they subpoena him and bring him out there? Probably, but as a sitting president, it's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen as a sitting president. We know that. A lot of people are asking here in the UK, why is it, okay, the congressional hearings are happening and the congressional members of this committee are saying, look, this is stuff, the FBI and should have been looking at, the Justice Department should have been looking into, and they're asking the questions that haven't been answered. But or asked at all. But we've got a situation where we have the Epstein files involving huge number of American, very powerful men, very rich, very powerful men, politicians like being implicated. Again, being mentioned in those files doesn't in any way imply any guilt, and we do need to stress that. But we've had a British woman, Ghislaine Maxwell, go behind bars. Quite rightly, as his accomplice. We've also got two men, of the former Prince Andrew and the former British ambassador to the United States, former Business Secretary Peter Mandelson, both of whom have been arrested. No charges brought as yet, both declared no wrongdoing at all. But they've been arrested by the police here. We haven't seen any arrests in America. Why not?
And I think the main reason, and I've been talking to people about that, because they're saying, hey, why are we getting Prince Andrew? Why can't we get the guys here? And it comes down to, I think, the fact that the sharing of public secrets or state documents or whatnot is what seems to be bringing down the British politicians. In the U.S., a lot of these people are protected by the fact that they've already been investigated. A lot of people in these Epstein files have been investigated, and there's been a lot of back-end deals and this and a lot of suspicious behaviors. And I'm certainly with anybody who says that this should be the FBI conducting these investigations, there should be more pressure. I do believe, though, that the differentiator is that the Prime Minister emailed Mandelson forwards that email 30 minutes later, and now you sort of break the custody of chain of custody. I think you need to start hitting people on technicalities in the U.S. if you want to have the same result as we're having in the U.K.
Very interesting. Errol Moorcoach, thank you so much for joining, spokesman for Republicans Overseas UK. Henry Hills, political journalist and commentator, joining me in the studio for the whole show. Henry, I mean, it is fascinating that we're finally getting these congressional hearings and big names appearing, but I don't think anyone was thinking that Hillary Clinton was involved with the possible alleged abuse of young girls.
No, absolutely not. And I think this is... We were talking earlier about the problems with the prosecution service, but I think this is the other side of the coin, which is I think that it is always a bit of a circus when the politicians get in on this, right? Like, if there's actual criminal conduct, we have police. America has several layers of police, of FBI.
And the grandstanding we've seen in the British Parliament in the last couple of weeks.
Exactly. And so when we're going to summon them in front of a select committee, and occasionally it can be really valuable. During the post office scandal, for example, some of those select committee hearings were really useful. I don't want to completely deprecate it by any means. Generally, the ones that not everyone is looking at, the low-profile ones, they'll have some really good work in them. But once it's a big national story and you've got politicians being like, we must recall Parliament and some of them, it's a complete circus from start to finish. And, no political fan of Hillary Clinton. This was a massive waste of her and Congress's time.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we'll see what comes out of Bill Clinton. But again, he's been asked questions before. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. So again, got some question marks for a number of people. Allegations have been made where, how much do we trust the answers? Anyway, in a couple of moments, we're going to get the latest headlines. So we're going to be coming back to talk more about this. I mean, seismic is what Zach Polanski, the Green Party leader, has said about this Gorton and Denton by-election victory for the Greens, pushing Labour into third place. The Tories lost their deposit. Has British politics changed? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. 2 minutes past 11 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or your Connect device, thank you so much for joining us on. Yeah, unusually, I know I'm not normally on air on a Friday morning, but good Lord, I wanted to be here for this by-election result. Was it going to be a Reform victory for their candidate, Matt Goodwin? No, it was not. Was it going to be a safe Labour hold, shoring up Keir Starmer ahead of the local Welsh and Scottish elections? No, turned out not to be that either. Did the Tories just suddenly come through? No, they've lost their deposit. They got so few votes. Lib Dems, no one's even talking about them. Tell you they are talking about, though, the Green Party in what has been hailed as a huge victory, a seismic victory by Zach Polanski, the Green Party leader, for their candidate Hannah Spencer in Gorton and Denton, a seat in Greater Manchester that has been a Labour hold, one of Labour's safest seats since it was ever actually became a seat. But the Greens have taken that with a whopping great majority of 4,500, pushing Reform to second place, and the Labour Party, extraordinarily, into third place. Now, what does this tell us about British party politics going forward? That's what I want to know from you. Do give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV as well. Calls are charged at the national rate, and text cost £1 standard network rate message. We're going to be talking all about that. We're also going to be talking more about the Churchill statue, the famous statue of Churchill in Parliament, in Westminster, in Parliament Square, which has been defaced with Zionist war criminal graffiti. Absolute outrage. A man has been arrested on charges of that vandalism, but we're going to be talking about that. I'll show you, well, if you're watching right now, you can see the images. If that doesn't make you spit out your tea, I don't know what does. Joining me today, I'm delighted to say, for all the chat, is Henry Hill, political journalist and commentator. You're a Conservative, aren't you? You're not out in the cold. Who?
Yeah.
Who?
I went to University in Manchester Gorton, which is a big part of what this seat used to be. Yeah. Never exactly a Tory hunting ground. No. Nonetheless, one thing you could always say about the Tories is that outside Northern Ireland, they usually got their deposit. Right, I think not this time. The last time they lost their deposit was actually 1983, very strangely, and this shows, I think, the very dangerous thing. One, shows the real limits of the Kemi bounce. Right, we've heard an awful lot about this Kemi bounce in the polls recently. It's worth pointing out they're still 5 points down on when she became leader. But two, it shows that anywhere where Reform is in second place, or at least is ahead of the Tories, Reform have crossed that credibility threshold. Right, they're now, the Tories historically have been able to go, look, maybe you want to vote for UKIP or whoever. But
if you want to stop the other parties, you vote for us. 29% they got last night. It's very interesting. Well, look, no one's talking about the Tories. They are talking about the future of the Greens, the future of the Reform, and the future of the Labour Party, in particular, the future of the Prime Minister Keir Starmer as Labour leader. Well, he's done a pooled interview, putting on a brave face. But we'll get you that video in just a moment. But he said that the by-election defeat was, shall I do the voice? Very disappointing. But he insisted that he understood voters are frustrated and impatient for change. The trouble is, the change they're impatient for, Prime Minister, may not be the change that you want to give them. And asked if he'd considered resigning, the Prime Minister said he would keep on fighting for the people who needed a Labour government. He said also, I will also fight against the extremes in politics on the right and left, parties that want to tear our country apart. Now, let's talk about the extremes on the right and the left. Now, this is the thing. I wrote a piece. I'm not big of a Sun, but I've written this piece in the Sun today, column in the Sun, basically saying, by this time, Green Party have probably won. And actually, this is a good thing. Now, this may surprise a lot of my audience. I think it's a good thing. I think it's about time, when the Greens win an election like this, they actually get a little bit of scrutiny, because they've been allowed to be all things to all men, haven't they? And women, and anyone in between, because apparently they think there are people in between those two groups. On the one side, they're cuddly, lovely eco-progressives. It's all LGBTQI+++++, and all welcoming all the immigrants and universal basic income, love, and all of that nonsense. Tree hugging, although barely any mention of eco policies at all from the Greens these days. And at the same time, they've allied themselves with the basically Islamofascists, extremist Islamic views of some community leaders in the Muslim population in our country, who are obsessed. They say they're obsessed with Gaza and Palestinian rights. They're not. They're obsessed with hating Israel and Jews. Let's call it what it is. When they talk about human rights, which one Green Party activist said to us a few moments ago, people are concerned about human rights, which is why Gaza was a big theme in this election in Manchester, in February 2026 in our country. Why would Gaza be a big issue? There is no war in Gaza anymore. We've had a ceasefire. There is no genocide. There never was a genocide. Anyone who can count can tell you there wasn't a genocide. And yet they're still making that an issue. Don't seem to care at all about what's happened in Iran, don't care what's happened in Sudan, don't care what happened in Syria, don't care about many other countries where there are genuine mass murders quite deliberately by government or other forces. But apparently they only care when Jews are involved. And we all know why that is. You can't be all things to all men if people have got you under the spotlight. Zach Polanski is finally getting a little bit of proper scrutiny about some of the more insane policies they've got. I would say pretty much all of them. Not all are insane. Some of them are downright dangerous, Henry. So isn't it in a lot of ways a good thing that there's a bit of proper scrutiny of the left, and they'll stop treating Zach Polanski as if he's just some cuddly Labrador who means well?
I think that would be a thoroughly good thing. I think it might be too early to say that it's going to happen as a result of this by-election. The Liberal Democrats in the past have won an awful lot of surprise by-elections without getting treated like a serious party. I think that if we get closer to a general election and the Greens are polling in a way that they might end up with a substantial number of seats and end up siding the government, that will absolutely focus minds. Yeah. But I think it is perfectly possible, while I agree with you completely, that these parties, which are now polling substantially, do deserve much more scrutiny, if nothing else, because even if they weren't mad, right, like the public deserve to know more about them. They're polling at 15%.
Yeah.
But as you say, an awful lot of their policies are mad. I do think it would be useful if voters knew that. I suspect less confident than you that that's going to come immediately.
That's a very, very good point. I mean, Polanski, the leader, by the way, he's not an MP himself, chose not to run in this seat. He's a London Assembly member only, so he couldn't be Prime Minister because he's not an MP. Of course, he says if a seat comes up in London, he'd run for it in a by-election. But I mean, whether that happens or not, we shall wait and see. But he says on the basis of this result, the Greens could win 100 seats in a general election. But the reality is actually there aren't that many seats which have the sort of makeup of the student vote and this sort of sectarian immigrant vote, which is what they seem to have thrived on. But again, let's mention some of these policies. I mean, immigration. Literally open borders. This is stuff that Mail exposed this week. Literally open borders. No one will be deported. Anyone can come here. No one's going to be illegal. You're allowed to work here, use the NHS. You'll get given a free home. You literally get a free home. I don't know where they're getting all these homes from, because I have not been aware till this day of the free home magic tree which was handing them out. But there'll be a free home, and you can work if you want or not work if you don't want, because you get paid universal basic income, as will everyone else. Apparently, that's only going to cost about 75 billion. So relax, we've got that. I mean, that's just back of your pocket territory. Wealth taxes on millionaires and billionaires. A lot of people will support that. The reason why lots of countries don't have those is because you know what the wealthy do? They go and they scarper. There'll be all those dinghies, all the migrants. There'll be millions of people literally marching across Europe to try to get to Britain to get their free house and free money and guaranteed no deportation. They're going to leave those dinghies on the beach in Dover. I'll tell you what. They'll be commandeered by the wealthy, who will be going straight to France or anywhere else that isn't going to put the wealth tax on them. So we will be bankrupt within minutes. They're going to raise taxes on people on ordinary incomes as well, by the way. Net zero, not by 2050. No. Unachievable, undesirable, the lights will go out. By 2040. By 2040. That's an end of all fossil fuel use. That's what they want to do. We are talking about you being banned from using your car, heating your home with central heating, a frequent flyer tax, so you won't be able to afford to go abroad, certainly not more than once a year, if no matter how hard you work. We're talking about legalising all drugs, not just legalising cannabis, legalising heroin, cocaine, crack, the full works. Prostitution legalised, hardcore porn to be made more accessible and available to people. Literally, these are their own policy documents. Replacing first past the post voting system with PR, which of course would help them in the future, they would think. And again, this absolute obsession with Gaza, Palestine, these anti-Israel policies. And we saw Henry Hill, did we not? Even on election day, we saw the Green campaigners out flying flags, not the Union flag, not the England flag, flying the flags of Pakistan and Palestine. What the hell is going on? Is this basically a party playing with fire with sectarian politics?
I mean, it is a party that is effectively, and I think this is where the Green person who was on earlier did have a point. It is a party which is doing more openly and more shamelessly what the Labour Party has done with communal organising politics, and, in fairness, to a much smaller extent, partly because the community is smaller, what in some places the Tories do with Hindu populations, right? Which is that where you have a sufficient concentration of recent immigrants in an area, once you get a critical mass of that, that becomes a barrier to integration. Because if you think about it, two generations ago, people who moved here, they only had the analog TV. That was all in English, right?
Yeah.
You know, you had no choice, right? But to experience and integrate into British culture. But once you're in an area where there's enough Urdu speakers that actually you can get by using Urdu, to use the example, that becomes a really significant barrier to integration. And the Greens have spotted this. And one of the things about those communities is that they offer various mechanisms for organising and politically mobilising. And I think that this does, for now, set some kind of limit. You were quite right. There are only a limited number of seats in the country where the Greens, this combination exists, right? But they are enough, and they're in areas where no one else has challenged Labour before, right? We're talking about inner city seats and student seats. Those are some of Labour's safe seats. They're the ones the Tories and Reform can't get to.
I mean, there are no safe seats at the moment for Labour. That's going to be their concern. Yeah, there are 37 constituencies with a Muslim population over 20%, and a further 73 seats with a Muslim population between 10 and 20%. If we are looking at this sort of campaigning going on the left, we are looking at blatant sectarian politics. And also, crucially, that has people go, oh, well, it's a few here and there. Well, I mean, Muslims who are British citizens and entitled to vote have just as much right to have their views represented in Parliament as anyone else. However, when those views are basically for sectarian reasons from back home, from whether your views are of Pakistan or from India or wherever, they are actually directing British foreign policy on issues and directing, for instance, things like should we or shouldn't we have a blasphemy law and all these issues, then I'm sorry, I think we need to have a conversation about it, and at least have a conversation about whether or not this is something we think is a good idea or not. I mean, I was absolutely outraged by the fact that we had campaign leaflets and a video put out in Urdu by the Greens, and people say, oh, you're just being racist. I don't want it going out in French. I don't want it going out in Italian. And if you can vote in this country because you're a British citizen, you should be able to speak English well enough to be able to understand any campaign videos. And also, any campaign, all parties do targeted campaigns at different groups, you know. But at the end of the day, if your campaign leaflet can't be read by the vast majority of people in this country, I think you're looking at very divisive politics. Now, let's also talk about this in relation to what Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, has said. He said that basically the Greens cheated. He said this was a victory for sectarian voting and for cheating. He's also talked about these concerns about these accusations of family voting by election observers. Now, this is Democracy Volunteers. Unless you are someone working in a polling station or you are going in to vote, you are not allowed to hang around in a polling station. You ain't even allowed to hang around outside a polling station. There are very strict rules to stop people being intimidated when they go to vote. And when you actually go to vote, if you've not done it in person, that curtain is pulled behind you. So you can tell someone you voted a certain way, but you don't have to actually vote that way. It's your vote, and no one will know but you how you voted. They say, and they have 2 people in polling stations. They did there are hundreds of different polling stations, and they did an hour at a time, 2 people. And they said at 10 o'clock last night when the polls closed, this is a quote from Democracy Volunteers, the highest levels of family voting at any election in our 10-year history of observing elections in the UK. And this is where family members go into a voting booth together. And the big concern here, and Nigel Farage said this was in Muslim areas, this is Muslim women being told how to vote by their Muslim husbands. Now, I do not know if that is the case. I haven't seen any data on that. But we do know there is an issue of this in British politics and in politics in the countries from the heritage of these people who are in this constituency. We know that we have imported many corrupt electoral practices from the Indian subcontinent, where they have a history of democracy because former colonies, but Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, notorious for corruption in their elections. And that is a practice that has been brought over here. And people can go, oh, that's terribly, terribly racist and bigoted to say. No, it's simply a fact that that is the case. And in virtually every constituency in Britain in the last 20 years where there's been an allegation of impropriety, postal voting or like, it's been usually it's been Labour. It's been a Labour seat before we've had these insurgent parties, and it's been where there has been a very large immigrant population from the Indian subcontinent, and that is simply a matter of fact.
Yeah, I think the reason that is the case when it comes to salience is that, of course, it is perfectly possible, and I think that when we talk about family voting, it's simply an extension of the problems with postal voting. Yeah. There's no secret ballot in the home, right? Now, of course, a domineering husband of any community could control how his wife votes using a postal vote.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone denies that that's a possibility. But where we see big spikes in this behaviour, right, now that is because it intersects with that communal organising that I mentioned earlier, right? You've got, I hate the phrase, community leaders.
Yeah, self-appointed.
Right? Absolutely. And parties in some areas where there's this kind of machine politics going on, that instead of engaging directly with the voters as citizens, they engage with community leaders and with...
Well, they go to imams.
We heard it earlier, engaging with the community. It's like, well, I've a serious question. Who's my community leader?
I've always wondered who my community leader is, exactly. But I've got friends of mine who've actually campaigned, one for the Respect Party. We do not agree on our politics. And she said, no, you go to the local imam and you basically persuade the local imam, and then the local imam tells everyone in the mosque who to vote for. That's what happens.
And I think there's one thing that's really...
She's very clear about it.
And I think there's one thing that's really worth mentioning whenever especially when you say that people say pointing this out is racist, is that you can take the Muslim stuff out of it for a second. Yeah. Sectarian politics is rotten for democracy anyway. My family's Irish.
It's rotten in Northern Ireland,
right,
it's rotten
this is
here.
It, right? I've spent a lot of time in Northern Ireland. Now, in Northern Ireland, politics, electoral democratic politics there has collapsed because what matters is not what are they offering, not their views on the economy, but are they Protestant or Catholic?
Yeah.
Those are not foreign problems, right? Those are centuries old domestic problems, but they are still utterly destructive to democracy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Do you know what's also destructive to democracy is actually defacing the man who means that we do actually have democracy. Extraordinary. The right to protest in this country wouldn't have it if it wasn't for, and I'm saying it's absolutely clear, one man, Winston Churchill. His role in basically gearing us up to, taking over as Prime Minister, gearing us up to fight the Second World War, to fight the biggest threat in modern times to democracy and freedom and our values, which of course was Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. It comes down to Churchill. There is a reason why we have a huge big statue of him in the heart of Westminster, and yet that statue of Winston Churchill in Parliament Square has been defaced yet again. Defaced, of course, you remember during Black Lives Matters in 2020 when the word racist was of course rather tiresomely daubed on it. This time, if you are watching, you can see the pictures, and I tell you what, you will be spitting out your tea and your stomach will be turning over. But someone with big red paint daubed the words "Free Palestine" and "Zionist war criminal" on the statue of the former Prime Minister last night. And on the other side wrote, "Never again is now," and globalise the intifada. What's bizarre about this is "Never again is now" is actually the chant of Jewish people saying, when we say never again, you need to obey, it's happening now. We've had the Bondi massacre, we've had what happened October the 7th, the Manchester synagogue attack. Never again is now. They're taking that, putting it alongside globalise the intifada, which is basically the chant of Hamas and the Islamist extremists for the killing of all Jews and all people in Israel. So this is an extraordinary thing for these people to write on the statue of the man who has protected the rights of, frankly, let's be honest, the whole of Western Europe. In terms of his leadership of this country in the Second World War. This is such an abomination. Here's my question, though, Henry. How the hell was this able to happen? Now, someone has been arrested over this outrageous attack on one of our great democratic heroes and historical heroes in this country. But this is an error. You worked in Westminster years. I worked in Westminster years. You are surrounded by police. Armed police, I'd like to point out. You are surrounded by CCTV everywhere. What on earth is someone able to do? It's not like someone's just gone and spray painted 1 minute. There's a lot of letters, a lot of words, and they've been able to do that, and no one has taken any action. If I'd been walking by, I'd have manhandled them to the ground myself. I am so appalled by this. How on earth has this happened in the heart of Westminster? Again!
one quick sidebar. I think that having armed police they are less able to intervene in normal.
Shoot
things.
him!
I mean,
shoot him! I wouldn't care. Shoot him.
Fine.
I don't care.
Fine. It's not currently.
You make a fair point.
Shoot on sight is not currently.
Not currently official policy.
Now I want to caveat this by saying that obviously I haven't looked at the specific case, but there is one thing which I found fairly consistent when I've talked to police and people involved in police policy, right, about disorder, and it's that there is currently a quite strong preference for prioritising the well-being of those involved over the prevention of violence.
Sort of dragging the little toe rag down by his foot and banging him to the ground.
So I had this...
Oh, well, you seem to have hurt your head. I'm so sorry, sir.
So I've had this debate several times over riots, right?
Yeah.
Because these days, the police strategy for riots is that they form a big ring around the riot. They let the rioters smash cars and burn shops and all the rest of it. They get lots of pictures and then they go and arrest them afterwards.
Yeah.
And I pointed out that actually this is not much comfort if you're someone whose livelihood has been burned down.
Yep.
Right? And the genuine pushback I get is that actually the alternative would be prioritising property over people.
Which is absolute rubbish, because actually...
Well, it's what you should do, right? The property of the law-abiding should trump the well-being of the vandal, right?
Yep. But the interesting thing here, of course, is they don't take that have that policy when they're policing, say, Tommy Robinson March or anything they consider to be, quote, far right, because they take a very, very different approach there.
Well, you and I have discussed this before, right? The real toxic danger for the police of the fact that they are increasingly seen on case-by-case basis to be doing two-tier policing, right?
No, and they're not seen to be.
On the observed to. On the subject of the Jewish community, which we've talked about, in this country, it will be the Jewish counter-protesters who get moved on because of the threat that other people might beat them up. Yeah, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then they wonder why people don't trust the police anymore. Love to hear your thoughts on everything we are talking about. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Just a reminder to you about what Keir Starmer has had to say in a pooled interview since that, well, let's face it, humiliation of that by-election in Gorton and Denton. This was one of Labour's safest seats. Got more than 50% of the vote at the last election. He's the man who decided that Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, who many say would have actually won this seat, would not be fighting this seat. He basically didn't want a challenger as an MP in Parliament, but they've basically come third behind the Greens and Reform, lost that seat. Keir Starmer, though, has refused to quit. He said it was a very disappointing result. Incumbent governments often get results like that midterm, which is true. He says, but I do understand that voters are frustrated. They're impatient for change. He also said he was going to fight against the extremes in politics on the right and the left. Parties, he says, who want to tear our country apart. But the reality is, what they could end up doing is tearing the Labour Party apart. Your thoughts? Welcome. Up next, this is Talk.
We genuinely are on resignation watch. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson, who faces a criminal investigation.
Can Keir Starmer survive the Mandelson scandal? We have breaking news for you. We've just been talking about, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff. We've now had another resignation from number 10. And Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, Tim Allen, has now also resigned. The plot is sickening. The noose is tightening.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, by the way. 11:28 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer here on Talk. Thank you very much, Dee, for joining me. Lots of you on the phone lines. Let's get straight to those calls. 0344 499 1000. What do you make of that Green victory in the Gorton and Denton by-election? Let's talk to Martin in London. Hello, Martin.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well. What do you want to say?
Well, as a Reform voter, I'm not as disappointed as you might think because I can see the bigger picture. This particular constituency, Reform were never going to win because of the demographics involved. But what's interesting is if you look at the vote share, Reform got 29%, and that matches the national opinion polls, despite what some
very good point.
Rival media. Yeah, let's just say there's a rival left-wing network to Talk who like to say that Reform is in decline. Well, that's proof that the vote share is absolutely 29-30%.
And that's when it's being squeezed, massively when we got this surge from the Greens.
Absolutely. And what's very interesting is if Reform had got that vote share, which they would have done in any other by-election where the demographics were a bit more normal than this particular seat, Reform would have won last night.
Yes.
So looking forward, I'm not as disappointed because it's pretty clear now that Reform are going to do brilliantly in a couple of months' time in the local elections. Yep. And I would like to say, though, as a listener to Talk, a lot of people ring up Talk saying how they think Reform have sold out and they're now voting for Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe. I would just like to say to some of these people, last night is the warning for you of what happens if you think that Ben Habib, whose party last night got less votes than the Monster Raving Loony Party in this by-election, if you think Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe, who is basically a bitter old man with a lot of money, who set up a political party out of vengeance and who seems to think that being an ethno-nationalist is going to sweep you to power, I would say to all of those people that ring up Talk, don't lose faith with Reform. If you want to stop a Zach Polanski, Labour, Liberal coalition from hell, with probably lots of Gaza independents on top of it, if you want to stop that, you're going to have to vote Reform. It's as simple as that.
I genuinely, Martin, in terms of that analysis, I couldn't agree with you more. And I despair when I see all this stuff online about the Restore Britain and we've got Advance UK, whatever. They're just a load. I'm sorry, I'm with you. It's a whole load of male egos. I get on perfectly well with these gentlemen. They've been on my show many times, but it's male egos. People who've fallen out with Nigel Farage, and he does fall out with a lot of other big egos, but basically trying to be rivals, they are going to damage the chances of getting any government that actually they would prefer to have. A lot of times in politics, you don't get... The reason why I've never stood in politics, the reason I'm not a member of political parties, there's no party that completely matches where I stand on issues. So, I couldn't toe the line on something. But, if you actually care about, you have to choose like your top 3 or 4 big issues, and then you vote for the party that is going to deliver those, or you vote against the party that is the worst on those. You don't get to have your perfect party that you agree with every word of.
I agree. Yeah, you're never going to agree with 100% of anything with a political party. For me, I'd say I agree with probably 90% of Reform. So that's enough for me.
Yeah, more than enough for most people.
Yeah, and I would say, as you saw last night, what you see on X, where Rupert Lowe is obviously very, very popular, but if there was a poll last week that said that 92% of people in Britain don't know who Rupert Lowe is.
No, exactly.
And yet, if you're on X, you'd think this guy's going to sweep to power.
Elon Musk seems to think the same as well, and this is a ridiculous thing when they actually did a poll when he was very much in the news over all that, and he's done some fantastic campaigning on the grooming gangs, and Elon Musk was retweeting when they did a poll again. Vast majority of people didn't know who he was, and that included the vast majority of Reform voters, and that tells you everything, doesn't it? Really interesting call, Martin. Thank you very much indeed for that. Richard is in Middlesex. Richard, what do you want to say?
Hi, it's about this election. I always thought that when you go to the polling station, I was told it's one person, one cubicle. So how come they do?
Well, this is the thing. The election observers said they observed a number of occasions when, husbands and wives, presumably, people were inside the cubicle together. These polling stations, these are all visible. If that was happening, that should be being stopped by the staff there. But there may be reasons why that isn't stopped. The authorities have said they didn't see any of this, but these observers, democracy volunteers, they're allowed in the polling station to monitor because they have been very reputable. So it's a strange thing for them to make up, isn't it?
And one other thing, Julia, how can this government can't see round Parliament with all the cameras and the police there, they cannot see these horrible people that sprayed Churchill's memorial.
I genuinely, I'm with you. But as Henry Hill was just pointing out, they'll take this view that, we'll get some CCTV of whoever it is who's done it, and then we'll arrest them the next day. And there has been arrest. Again, people are innocent until proven guilty. But, if there are charges brought. But most of us would just say, yank the tow rag off while they're doing it and pull them to the ground. And if someone climbing up and gets hurt on the way down, I'm not really sure I'm bothered about that, to be honest with you.
The headline news. I've not heard it on any radio or nothing. I've only set for your radio, and I've looked it up.
It's all over social media. But I just saw it, and my stomach turned over. It's so appalling. But again, that happens overnight on the day when we're told, no, there isn't any risk of sectarian politics in this country, and anyone talking about that is just stirring up hatred and division, and there's a bigot and a racist. And there you are. You've got someone defacing the greatest prime minister this country has ever had, who saved our country, saved democracy in the West of Europe. And he's having stuff daubed on him, which is blatantly, openly sectarian.
Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And I totally agree with everything you've said.
Oh, well, I'm looking for a second husband. No, I'm not looking for Richard. No, I don't think my husband agrees with anything. But anyway, Henry Hill, this thing is, a lot of people are going to be very angry about this, as we were discussing. There's lots more to come. Coming up, we are going to be talking to our favourite of ours. He's a Conservative peer, but he also, with a different hat on, is a top leading pollster. That is Lord Hayward, about what he makes of the result last night. And let's face it, the Tories didn't get a look in, so he can give his honest tuppence worth. He's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 11:37. Let's turn our attention, continue our attention to the Gorton and Denton by-election and what it means for British politics. Putting that question out to you, 0344 499 1000. First up, let's hear from Robert and Lord Hayward. He's a Conservative peer. They didn't have much of a good show in that by-election result, losing their deposit, the worst result for the Tories, I think, pretty much ever anywhere. But he's also, of course, as you'll know him well from our election night coverage, a leading pollster too. A very good morning to you, Lord Hayward.
Good morning, Julia. Please call me Robert.
And
I also want to touch on family voting because that's
well,
where I
100% we're going to get onto that. No, look, I mean, the Tories just by the by, no one cares. Lib Dems not in contention. We were told that this was a seat that Reform could win. We were told then that this was a three-way race. It was very close. There might be recount after recount. We wouldn't get the result in the early hours of the morning. It'd be after ages because it was the Labour hold seat, one of their safest seats, but challenges from both the Greens and Reform. As it was a stunning, absolute, well, Zach Polanski calls it a seismic victory for the Greens, a big solid majority. Labour pushed into third place behind Reform. What is your big takeaway from that result? What does it tell us?
It tells us that the voters, as we've been watching over the last year, 2 years, are actually unhappy with the legacy parties, i.e. the Conservatives and Labour Party in particular, and they're looking for alternatives, whether they're on the left or the right. They are going in other directions to alternatives. And on this occasion has been identified historically a Labour seat, and therefore large numbers of people, for a whole host of different reasons, decided to support the Greens.
Yeah.
It's a great victory for the Greens, but the people who are really going to suffer under these circumstances are the Labour Party, and particularly number 10. I had a text at something like 3 o'clock this morning saying the recriminations have already started, even before the result had been announced.
I can imagine. I mean, especially as it was the Prime Minister's decision not to run a candidate who many believe, I don't know whether this would be true, I'd love to know your thoughts, could have actually won that seat, the very popular incumbent Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham. He wanted to get back into Parliament. He was basically denied, basically told, you cannot, by the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, do this because we'll then have to have an election for the mayor, and we'd rather just basically, I think they basically figured we'd rather lose this seat than lose the Manchester Mayor, but actually it was all about Keir Starmer didn't want the king of the North to come down and be able to challenge him for the leadership. Was that the key decision that led to the Labour defeat, do you think?
No, it was one of the decisions. After all said and done, we have an historically unpopular government with U-turn after U-turn, most unpopular incoming government of all time, not only just in this country, but in other Western democracies.
That's quite a thing to say, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well done, Keir. He's done something. He's managed to achieve something.
It's not so it wasn't the reason, but there is no question in my mind that had Andy Burnham been the candidate, Labour would have won.
Oh, that's interesting. He's got name recognition. He's a very popular figure. He's also a figure who kind of defies sort of the party. He's not just supported by a lot of Labour people, isn't he? This is the interesting thing. The Prime Minister said he's refusing to quit. He said he was a very disappointing result, but he pointed out incumbent governments quite often get results like that mid-term. Just like, you know, Donald Trump's facing mid-term elections in November this year. Most American presidents lose the mid-term elections. Most by-elections in Britain, mid-term around this time, they are lost. But this is a catastrophic loss for Labour, given it's one of Labour's safest seats, isn't it?
It is a catastrophic loss, but you're actually interviewing somebody who managed to lose Christchurch quite a few years ago as one of the safest.
You know what it feels like. What chance did the Reform Party ever have?
They were hyping it as they could win. And you should, if you are leading a campaign, you should be very careful in your choice of words. And they kept saying, we're going to win, we're going for victory, etc. Now, there's ways you phrase that, as you know, but they convinced the media they were in with a chance. The opinion polls said that they were in with a chance. at the end of the day, this is a stunning victory for the Green Party, and one shouldn't deny it.
No, absolutely not. What does it mean, though, for the future? Because we've got Zach Polanski saying, the Green leader, who's interestingly not an MP himself, is a London Assembly member, and he's saying, look, this could mean us winning, say, 100 seats at the next general election. Given the unique, well, it's not unique, but unusual makeup of this seat, you've got basically two different, completely different sort of areas, Gordon and Denton. In Gorton, you've got a load of students, again, very much big appeal from the Green Party. We've also got a very large Muslim vote, and we've seen that sectarian campaigning, even leaflets in Urdu for the Pakistani heritage population. And then you've got Denton, which is a largely white working class, much older population. But that's only a third of the seats, which tells you why Reform probably weren't in with a chance overall. But how many other seats are there where the Greens could, either in a by-election, do well, or in a general election when they're having to spread their campaigning efforts over 650 seats?
I think you know me well enough to say that I won't actually start talking about a general election that's 3 years out.
You never do. You never fall for it. Darn.
There is a very significant set of elections coming up on May the 7th.
Yeah.
And this by-election has serious implications for those local elections in England, Scotland and Wales. And there is no doubt that the momentum that the Greens have got coming out of this by-election means that they will do incredibly well, almost certainly, barring some disaster between now and May the 7th, in the London boroughs, in big cities like Leeds, like Birmingham, like Manchester. But at the same time, the Labour Party are going to have to try and pick themselves up. While in Westminster they're debating who should be the leader, nationally the organisation is going to have to try and pick itself up and get out on the doorstep and campaign for those same local elections.
But this is a difficult thing. Reform are taking on, the Tories largely, I take on Labour voters as well. Tories facing that threat from the right. Labour have been focused, whether it's PMQs, whether it's campaign literature in this election, it's all been about reform. It's all about stop reform. But the Greens have crept up on the left, taken over from the Lib Dems as the sort of, the resurgent, insurgent alternative vote on the left. The reality is that Labour is being squeezed massively, and there's a lot of talk this morning from very, very angry MPs, and you'll be getting messages too, and activists saying, we need to move to the left. Is that where the Labour's political future lies, lurching to the left, going back to perhaps more Corbynista appeal?
Not necessarily, because although you're right in saying that there'll be places like Essex, Norfolk, Suffolk and May the 7th where the Reform will be the threat to the Tories, the Reform are the threat to the Labour Party in places like South Tyneside, Sunderland, Thurrock, all across the country. So it's Reform are not just taking votes off the Conservatives. And in those areas where, like Denton, the smaller part of the constituency, people who are traditionally Labour voters are now turning to Reform. And they will show that come May the 7th in many of the traditional Labour bastions around England and also in parts of Scotland and Wales.
Indeed. And it's interesting that their vote held up, as one of our callers just pointed out, 29%. That was their vote. That's around where they're polling, and so the polling is not a mirage, and when people actually go to the polls they vote differently. Let's also talk about, and you mentioned it at the start, these accusations of what's called family voting by election observers. This is an organisation called Democracy Volunteers. They're allowed into polling stations, 2 observers at a time, to observe elections, making sure everything's above board. They issued a statement on the dot of 10 o'clock last night when the polling stations closed, saying they'd seen the highest levels of family voting at any election in our 10-year history of observing elections in the UK. We've seen Nigel Farage saying that this was an election that was a victory for the Greens for sectarian voting and cheating. What do you make of those claims?
Well, I was involved in with Democracy Volunteers when I actually changed the law to make absolutely clear that family voting is not allowed.
And what do we mean by that? Explain to people who've just tuned in what that means.
The Electoral Commission had said it was unclear that people were not allowed to stand alongside other people when they were voting. So I, working with Democracy Volunteers, introduced a private member's bill to stop it. And this is where somebody stands, normally a male, stands alongside a female in the polling booth, at the polling booth, and ostensibly, whether it's physical, just by being there or by instruction, is telling the other person, or maybe telling the other person, how they should vote. And it's presumed often to be the husband telling the wife, it may be father telling the daughter, but it is also on many occasions father telling son or mother telling daughter. So and although the supposition automatically is that it is a Muslim issue, quite strikingly from the work that Democracy Volunteers have done over years, which I've worked with them on, it is actually quite striking how prevalent it is in other communities as well.
Well, I was saying that as far as I've been aware, when there have been allegations of sort of, people voting irregularities, whether it's postal voting or anything else, it has often been, actually, it's Indian subcontinent. So it's not a Muslim issue. It's an issue of people from a heritage whether it's Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, other countries as well, where the norms of basically corrupt political practices are brought over here and are normalised.
I think that's too easy an answer. In the Runcorn by-election, Democracy Volunteers, for example, actually watched a very elderly British couple where they went to the same polling booth. The wife handed her ballot paper to her husband. Her husband put the cross in the place that they'd been deemed to be the case and handed the ballot paper back.
Just extraordinary. So can I ask you, you say you've worked with this organisation, Democracy Volunteers. I mean, these are reputable, for when they say that, because the Manchester election authorities are saying, they've got note, there were reports of this at the time, they didn't say anything until after the polls had closed. We don't accept this has happened. No one's raised this. Is there any reason not to believe what these observers have said?
No, Democracy Volunteers not only watch elections in this country, they do so in Holland, in Sweden, and everywhere else. They issue reports, they operate, and they provide their information to the Electoral Commission, etc. Manchester City Council, and I'm a fan of returning officers and presiding officers. They do a very difficult job. But on this occasion, the position is Democracy Volunteers are not allowed to interfere. They have that power to stand in the polling station on the condition that they do not intervene. So that's why they wouldn't have said anything. Wrong, I'm afraid.
Lord Hayward, really good to get your view on this. Robert Hayward, Conservative peer and pollster, thank you very much indeed. Henry Hill, listening to all of that?
I think, again, it was interesting earlier. We hear so often, people on the right compared to Donald Trump and Trumpianism. But it was interesting, the moment that Democracy Volunteers, which is, as we've said, an organisation that's been around for some time, and it's run by an academic. I mean, let's face it, the odds of those people making up things for the benefit of Reform UK is really small. All of a sudden, it's a trumped-up fake group making
Left
things
does it
up.
just as much.
It's just like, so the moment it comes up, and I think that we do need to take this kind of thing seriously. But again, as I've said before, it is simply a particularly visible manifestation of a much more widespread problem, which is that postal voting, there's none of this, right? There's no Democracy Volunteer in someone's house when they're looming over their potentially abused or tyrannised partner and making them vote a particular way. And we have now completely normalised postal voting in this country, and we need to roll that back.
Yeah, absolutely. Genuinely, my husband and I both do postal votes. I genuinely don't know how my husband votes. He won't tell me. Quite right. I mean, it's his votes. But whenever I ask people on air, they're talking about it, I'll say, do you mind me asking you how you voted? Feel free not to answer, because no one should ever have to answer how they voted. It's such an important part of our democracy. 11:50 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking more about that Green win and what does it mean for future politics. This is Talk.
every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically?
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:53 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Henry Hill's still with us, and now we're joined by James Ball. He's political editor of The New World. A very good morning to you, James.
Good morning.
And thank you very much for joining us. Well, look, there's only really one topic in town today, and that's the Gorton and Denton by-election victory for the Greens. Seismic victory, says Zach Polanski. Is that what you make of it?
I mean, it is pretty seismic. The Greens have never got more than 10.2% in a by-election. They've never won a by-election. They've never won a northern seat. And this was, depending how you count it, this was Labour's 38th or 57th safest seat. I think you've got to give them it. Love or loathe the Greens. This is a pretty seismic win for them. In the same way, you know, Plaid got a pretty seismic by-election win a couple of months ago, and last Parliament Reform had a couple too.
Well, indeed. Now, we know, and Keir Starmer's perfectly within his rights to point out that, you know, midterms, government, or not, most governments haven't ever been any government's ever been as unpopular as his government is, or he as a Prime Minister. But, you know, even the most popular governments lose by-elections. What do you make of the fact that the Labour vote was squeezed into third place by both the Greens on the left and Reform on the right? Is that a new big concern for the Labour Party?
I think it's exactly what they've been worried about, but it's also, it's their whole theory of the election has been that voters would rally back to Labour to stop Reform. Yeah. They sort of knew a lot of voters on their left really hate Reform, and they thought they'll abandon the Greens, they'll abandon the Lib Dems, they'll vote Labour, that's how we'll get a second term. And if they can't do it in a seat as safe as this, then they can't do it anywhere. This theory doesn't work. They can't try and out-reform on immigration, which I think they were trying, but doing very badly, and sort of expect that other people will then turn around to them. And that's a disaster, because it means that this isn't just messaging, this isn't just a blip. This is their whole core strategy. Yep. And whatever they say today, Labour thought they could hold this seat.
Certainly. Honestly, after I said, I'll definitely want to work on Friday, it'll be a really interesting election result, and then the word was going around, it's close, but it's probably going to be a Labour hold, which would have been the least newsworthy of those stories on all those options. But, I mean, it wasn't close to a slight Labour hold, was it?
No, they've briefed for weeks that they thought they could hold it, that the returns were better, and they really seem to believe it. So I think there's going to be a lot of shock and a lot of reckoning at that, because, I mean, the Greens beat Reform by 4,500 votes, and then Reform beat Labour by another 1,000. Labour only got 9,000 votes in this election. They had a majority of 13,000 19 months ago.
Yeah. Well, they won more than 50%
a third-term
of the vote.
government.
No, and that's the interesting thing. I mean, in terms of the implications for Keir Starmer personally, everyone's saying, look, the potential leadership challenges, they're not ready yet. You know, Angela Rayner is still waiting for HMRC report into her not paying her full stamp duty on her second home. We've got Andy Burnham's not even back in Parliament yet. Wes Streeting's waiting for everything to die down on his friendship with Mandelson. And no one's ready yet. They're all going to wait for the local elections, the Welsh elections, the Scottish elections. But how bad do you think those are going to be based on this polling? Because the thing about these things, although it's one by-election, it's one day of election in one particular area, that does get extrapolated. People go, see, they can win, whether it's Reform or Greens or anyone else, and therefore that makes it more likely that people will, on balance, vote for some of the parties that are previously been thought of as a wasted vote.
I mean, the tricky thing for Keir Starmer is this would have been a great morning to sack Morgan McSweeney, who is their campaigns and election guru as well as number 10 chief of staff.
Yeah, not so much of a guru.
And unfortunately, he sacked him already for something else. So he can't really do that. But Labour's polling was bad. I mean, Labour was expecting awful results just off the polling. Yeah. This result suggests that they are underperforming that. And so what was already looking like a horrible set of elections is now looking existential. And so I think what you'll see in March and April is the various candidates who don't look ready try and set out a vision for Labour, try and set out what a fight back would look like, try and set out what their government would look like, while trying not to do that. Wait for the drubbing, which I think everyone thinks is inevitable. I don't think anyone thinks they can save it.
Let Keir Starmer take the
a lot of
hit
lives in May. Yes, I think in May it is going to be bloody.
Are we looking? I mean, look, they don't. The elections, all these cases are on May the 7th. The actual on the Thursday, the actual voting the vote counting won't be overnight for all of these elections. A few moralities, I think, will start early. Otherwise, it doesn't start till 9 o'clock on the Friday morning. We may not know any results until Friday afternoon. Some may still be going through into Saturday. Who knows? In which case, are we looking at Keir Starmer out the door on the Sunday?
I think maybe staggering through to the Monday. He is a very stubborn man. And I think when he says he wants to fight it, he thinks he can do the next election. I think he's probably the last man in Britain that believes that. And so I think he's going to make it painful.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be fun to watch, though, ain't it? For some of us, anyway. James Paul Blisco entered the new world. Thank you very much. Henry Hill, just very briefly, what do you think of that analysis? He'll stagger through. Everyone knows he's a goner.
Yeah, absolutely he is. And I think James also touched on something really important there, which we hadn't maybe discussed, which is Labour did not know what was happening in this seat. Right?
Yeah.
I talked earlier about the advantage of the big parties is that they've got more activists, they know what's going on. If that's not the case, that's going to terrify Labour because they've got lots
an awful lot of them, not just Labour activists, Labour councillors who are facing losing their seats, although a lot of them I think will be Tories in this next election. Remember them, but also crucially Labour MPs who thought, well, there's a challenge, there's a difficulty, but my seat's safe. It right now doesn't look like any seat that Labour holds is safe, as we saw with the Tories when they found out that actually turns out there is no such thing as a safe seat with these challenges coming from sort of left and right. Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. It's going to never let anyone tell you politics is boring, folks. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Get some more of your calls in the next half hour. 0344 499 1000 is the number to come. We'll talk to We'll talk to Reform UK's Alex Wilson about that result coming up next after we get to the top of the hour and get the latest headlines. This is Talk. Fancy returning to the front line as Foreign Secretary?
I am going to return. I am going to return.
To
the people from whence I came.
Hello, I'm Peter Mandelson, and I'm proud to serve as His Majesty's British Ambassador to the United States of America.
I feel a tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered as a result of his behaviour and his illegal criminal activities. And secondly, I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done.
The Ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
Mandy's out 4 decades and 3 scandals, or 3 that we know about. Guess what? Number 10 knew all about it. They knew that he lived in Jeffrey Epstein's flat.
Mandelson resigned from the Labour Party late last night over the allegation of the $75,000 set of payments to him from Epstein while he was business secretary, $10,000 to his now husband, a photo of him in his pants. This isn't just bad form. There are strong arguments here for him to be facing investigation over misconduct in public office.
I knew of his association with Epstein, but had I known then what I know now, I'd have never appointed him.
Breaking news that Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt. This is the establishment, the British establishment on trial. Came to us around about 5 o'clock when...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. You're not confused. It is a Friday. I am here. Why? Well, because we've got the Gorton and Denton by-election result. And wow, what a corker that was. We were told it was a three-horse race. We were told how close it was. Could Labour hold it by the skin of their teeth? No, they could not. Could Reform take that seat in another by-election victory? No, it turns out they couldn't either. It's the Greens, Zach Palancy's Greens, who have taken that seat with a 4,500 majority, taking one of Labour's safest seats from them in a midterm by-election. Well, we're talking a lot about that, about what does it mean for British politics more widely, what does it mean for Keir Starmer's future, the Labour Party, and Reform's chances at the May elections as well. And the small matter of does anyone remember the Conservatives right now? Worst result for the Conservatives pretty much ever at a by-election. They lost their deposit. That's how bad it was. But all the focus right now is on the Greens and their, well, insurgent chances against Labour on the left, and of course the focus on Reform on the right of the Labour Party. Is the Labour Party over? Is it the end of the two-party politics? But how many times have we heard that before? Oh yeah, 2010 and 2019. How's that working out for you? But I want to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls to charge the national rate, and text costs one standard network rate message as well. Going to be talking a little bit more about the Chagos Islands. Also, the small matter of the statue of Churchill in Parliament Square being defaced once again. This has absolutely turned my stomach this morning. The words "Free Palestine," "Zionist war criminal," "Never again is now," which is a Jewish slogan about not repeating the Holocaust and learning the lessons. And then next to it, "Globalise the Intifada," daubed in huge red painted words across the statue of our greatest ever Prime Minister, who, by the way, is the only sodding reason those people are able to actually protest in this country and hold those views publicly. It's an absolute outrage. We understand that someone has been arrested, but why the hell, with police surrounding that area, CCTV all over the place, the culprit was not stopped as they took to the statue? Frankly, questions need to be asked. Well, joining me to hopefully answer a lot of questions about all the topics we're talking about today is political journalist and commentator Henry Hill. More afternoon. Once again to you. We'll come back to that statue. Jenny, your call's welcome on that. I am absolutely seething after the 2020 Black Lives Matter's daubing of racist on his statue. The fact that it's ever been allowed to happen again is an outrage. But let's talk about this election result again. Just on the issue of 2010, when we were told, when we had coalition government for 5 years, the Tories and Lib Dems, we were told this is the end of two-party politics, weren't we? That was absolute. And then, of course, it all returned. 2015, Labour, Tory majority. And then 2017, it was all chaos, minority Theresa May government. And then 2019, there we were back to two-party politics. And we were told, weren't we, that Labour was finished for for a generation, certainly for 2 terms. Boris Johnson would serve 2 terms in office easily. He was out within a couple of years, over lockdown, Partygate and all of that. And then when we were told that Labour could be back, there we are, huge Labour majority. Every time an expert tells us what they think a by-election or any other result means for British politics, they have turned out to be wrong.
Yeah, and never go back and read analysis from 20 years ago or 10 years ago either, because again, it's full of confident predictions. Lots of books from about 1994, which were suggesting that Britain had turned into Japan and it was now effectively a one-party democracy and that Labour would never win again. And then there were lots of books about how the Tories would never win again in the mid-noughties, right? I mean...
The answer is we don't know what's going to happen on this week. Well, people didn't know what was going to happen in this by-election yesterday. They don't know what's going to happen on the 7th of May, local elections, Welsh and Scottish elections. They certainly don't know what's going to happen in 28, 29 at the next general election.
Of course they don't. And I think the interesting thing now is that you've got in British politics, you've got superficial churn, right? Like new parties, you know. But actually, on actual policy, there's some mad solutions from people like the Greens, but it's all in aid of keeping the bits that their voters like the same, actually. It's about not having to cut spending, right? It's about not having to make any personally difficult decisions. And I think British politics is just stuck in a rut.
Very interesting. Right, well, let's go to our next guest, and he's Alex Wilson. He's a Reform UK London Assembly member. A very good afternoon to you, Alex.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Commiserations, I suppose I should say. Your candidate, Matt Goodwin, in the Gorton and Barton Gorton and Denton. I've said Barton so many times over the last few weeks. Denton by-election. Didn't get the victory that many seem to have predicted he would get. Why do you think that is?
Well, he didn't get the victory that we hoped for, but you can't always pick and choose. Well, you can never pick and choose where a parliamentary by-election takes place. And if you look at the context of this constituency, the combined left vote in the 2024 general election, so add up Labour, Greens and the Workers' Party, who stood at that point, combined left vote of 74.3%. So the starting point was going to be a really big challenge for us. But we thought that it was worth throwing an awful lot at it. We had a fantastic candidate who worked harder than I've ever seen any candidate work in any election. And I've been involved in a lot of elections for the last 20, 25 years. And it had the most professional campaign that we've ever run, huge numbers of volunteers. That mobilisation that we did, we've learned a lot from that and how we campaign that will take forward into future contests. But we did very, very well. We doubled our vote share.
You got 29%. You've matched your poll ratings. Like people say. I mean, you're putting a bright slant on it. I have to say, I do think that Matt Goodwin is a very good candidate, but perhaps not for this particular seat.
Local connections to Manchester. He seemed like as good a candidate from the guard as anyone, and his work rate is just absolutely superb. So no, I'm very, very proud.
Well, let me play you a quick clip.
Having gone up to help doing it.
Okay, let me play you a quick clip of the victory speech from Hannah Spencer, the Green candidate, working class plumber, who interestingly, of course, apparently is in favour of the policies which the Green Party put forward about things like, not abolishing private landlords and rent controls, but is herself a private landlord with a second home. But there we are. Why would we ever expect anything other than hypocrisy in politics? But here's what she had to say in her victory speech this morning.
Working hard, what does that get you? Because talk to anyone here and they will tell you. The people who work hard but can't put food on the table, can't get their kids' school uniforms, can't put their heating on, can't live off the pension they worked hard to save for, can't even begin to dream about ever having a holiday, ever. Because life has changed. Instead of working for a nice life, we're working to line the pockets of billionaires.
I'm just wondering whether, Alex Wilson, that is a victory speech that could actually have been given by a Reform victor. A lot of that, working hard, what does that get you? Talk to anyone here, they'll tell you, people who work hard can't put food on the table. Isn't that exactly the Reform message? What's the difference between you and the Greens?
Until the last clause of her sentence, then yes, you may well be right. We do have a cost of living crisis.
You like billionaires. You're happy to line the pockets of billionaires.
People are working hard to line the pockets of Rachel Reeves and her massive tax grab. The national insurance hikes, business taxes going up, putting employment at risk. We had unemployment rising in every month since her first disastrous budget because she's taxing the private sector into extinction. So yes, it's very, very difficult for people to work hard, put food on the table, have a holiday. But that's because of the government overbearing on them. It's not because we're lining pockets of billionaires. We've had the biggest exodus of high net worth individuals leaving the country thanks to Rachel Reeves, and that means the burden falls on everybody else.
What do you make of the claims, and again, from a very reputable organisation, Democracy Volunteers, that they say there was the highest levels of family voting at any election in our 10-year history of observing elections in the UK, and this is where members of the family, it is nearly always, it's a husband or a father who's overseeing effectively the vote of the wife or other family members in the booth, behind the curtain, completely and utterly illegal in this country. The Democracy Volunteers said they saw this in the majority of the polling stations they attended. It's been denied by the authorities, but I mean, there's no reason why this organisation would make that up. Now, your party leader, Nigel Farage, has said that this was a victory for sectarian voting and cheating. Do you believe there was cheating?
This is really, really disturbing. The fundamentals of our democratic system are based on free choice, secret ballot, and not having your vote unduly influenced by somebody else, whether that's a family member or another party campaigner or whatever. You go into that polling booth in the privacy of you and you alone, and you cast your vote. That's how it's supposed to work. And the fact that these observers who are, this hasn't come from us as party campaigners seeing it going on. It's come from independent observers authorised by the Electoral Commission to watch over these polling stations, and they reported it as soon as polls had closed. It was on the news. I was hearing about it then. I was absolutely staggered and shocked to hear that. So it's very, very worrying. Would it have affected the overall result given the scale of the victory? Probably not. And the Greens can be very pleased with what they've achieved, but fundamentally, we can also be very, very pleased with our campaigners. They hard-working campaign, real professionalisation of the way that we mobilise people, which will take into the local elections and any future parliamentary by-elections. Doubled our vote share in line with national polling. But the other thing that's important to note is our growth as a party since the general election, and in particular since the local elections last year, has been national. In council by-elections, week after week, we've gained 63 seats. The Greens have gained just 3. So they've managed to get a great result for them in a particular constituency under particular circumstances. We're moving forwards in every region of the country and Scotland and Wales. And that's why we're in a very strong position still to be the next government.
OK, and that is a very fair point to make about the Greens in terms of where they can have an appeal, particularly when they are trying to combine a sectarian vote appeal with an appeal to, say, students, where they're very popular at the moment. What do you make of the sectarian voting allegations? Well, not even allegations. I mean, there's quite clear. We saw that campaign video from the Green Party in Urdu and campaign leaflets, basically, pictures of Keir, basically anti-Labour, but Keir Starmer with Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, blatantly going down, sectarian lines there, but also with Netanyahu, of course, the Israeli Prime Minister. What do you make of that sectarian voting?
Again, hugely, hugely worrying. People should be voting based on ideas, policies, and values, not on their religious affiliation. And that's again something that.
Well, don't people get to choose how they vote? I mean, they could vote because they like the colour of someone's jacket if they choose, can't they? It's their business.
Well, they do. If they're making that as a genuine free choice on their own and not being unduly influenced, and that's the worry. But you're right. The campaign material in other languages featuring Netanyahu, Modi, but that's something that Labour themselves did in the Batley and Spen by-election. Had, I think, Boris next to Modi. So Labour are crying crocodile tears, perhaps. Don't necessarily take everything they say with great seriousness. And I mean, the real story of this election and where this has a national implication is the collapse of the Labour vote. The Labour vote was halved. It was their 6th safest constituency in the country. Perhaps if Andy Burnham...
it wasn't their 6th, but it was one of their safest seats,
really safe seat. They collapsed, and this, going into those next elections in May, Labour should be extremely worried because whether it's this constituency or many councils up and down the country, people will be looking for the way to get Labour out. And that's just less than 2.
But honestly, you say people might be looking for the way to get Labour out, but they may choose, as it would appear the voters of Gorton and Denton did, which was that we want to get Labour out, but we don't want reform. And we saw the Greens taking the lion's share of the vote. Now, it is interesting that almost 70% of the vote in Gorton and Denton, just under 7 out of 10 votes, went to the Greens and reform, leaving Labour and the Tories, mostly Labour, with just 27% of the vote. That suggests that we have seen something seismic. But trying to get those votes, it's Labour seats you need to get. There aren't that many Tory seats left to get the reform. You kind of going for those Tory voters on the right, but you're also trying to get those Labour voters, disillusioned red wall voters, you'd say people exactly like people living in Manchester who had a sitting Labour MP until this morning, that actually, again, very difficult to appeal to both of those sets of voters at the same time.
A lot of the vote that we got yesterday will have come from people who voted Labour in 2024 and previously. The Conservative vote in the last general election was not particularly significant. So, and in the council by-elections that I've mentioned, the gains that we've made up and down the country, about half of those seats have come from Labour. If this had been a more kind of traditional red wall type seat, then I'm convinced we would have absolutely smashed it. So we're looking forward to the local elections. We're looking forward to wherever the next parliamentary by-election is, and of course the elections in Scotland and Wales, which are so important.
Can I ask you two other questions? One specifically on Zach Polanski. He is, of course, not an MP, chose not to run in this by-election. A lot of people thought he might do so, but I bet he's actually kicking himself that he didn't now. He's a London Assembly member, as indeed are you. What do you make of Zap Legacy? What, in terms of, you know, he's only very recently become the Green Party leader. Only recently, you know, appearing on, you know, the BBC Laura Kunsberg show and other shows, being interviewed. Had a very, very easy ride, I would suggest, until this point. Now the party is looking like a big insurgent party on the left, perhaps finally getting a little bit of interrogation of his policies and his views. But you must have seen a lot of him over recent years in the London Assembly. What do you make of him?
Well, you're right. He will get now the level of scrutiny that the Reform have been getting over the last 18 months. But no, he's an interesting character. He used to be a Lib Dem during the coalition years, so he's had quite an interesting political transition himself. I don't know how much he genuinely believes what he talks about, or whether he's just using it as a platform to you know, boost his own profile. But you know, the Greens can be very pleased with themselves for what they did yesterday, but I don't think that translates on a national level in the same way that our increase in vote share does. Because we're winning up and down the country, week on week, in those council by-elections and feeding into those crucial elections in May.
OK, just finally, I must ask you about the defacing of the statue of Winston Churchill again in Parliament Square in Westminster, defaced with pro-Palestine graffiti. Never again is now, globalise the Intifada, free Palestine, and outrageously Zionist war criminal. He's our greatest wartime Prime Minister. I would say our greatest Prime Minister ever. He's the reason we've got the freedom to have protests and all these funny things called elections. What did you make of the fact that, A, this was able to happen with so many police and CCTV cameras and the like? We understand arrest has now been made. But B, that we've had all these allegations that Reform are stirring up hatred, talking about sectarianism, and everyone's saying this is hateful rhetoric, and yet we have exactly that played out on the statue of our greatest ever Prime Minister.
You're absolutely right. Churchill, our greatest Prime Minister, he saved this country, he saved democracy under his leadership, and without that, none of us would be able to participate in the process as we do today. So to see this statue vandalised yet again, absolutely disgusting. An arrest has been made, but why wasn't there an intervention while it was going on? I mean, you see the pictures there; it looks absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah. That didn't take 5 seconds to do either. They would have been there quite some time doing that.
There's a lot of damage on there, a lot of paint, and that should have been nipped in the bud. And but it's symptomatic of we do have this rise in sectarianism and division, and people can accuse Reform of everything under the sun, but it's not us that goes around vandalising things. It's not us that goes around spreading this real hate and division, anti-Semitism at all-time high. It's absolutely disgusting. I'll be using my position at the appropriate time to ask the Mayor and the Met what they can do to make sure this doesn't happen again. OK, thank you very much. Great to talk to you. That's Alex Wilson, Reform UK London Assembly member. Henry Hill, coming back to the issue of the Gorton by-election. It's interesting that Alex, he's got the spiel. Everyone's given their spiel about, what to say in the wake of elections. But when he says, look, actually, there's no evidence that the Greens can, translate what they've done in this one by-election, these fairly unique set of voting demographics across the country, whereas you are seeing Reform. I mean, what's it, 250 polls now saying they're in the lead? And actually, in this election, OK, they didn't come first. They were soundly defeated by the Greens. But nevertheless, their vote share did hold up.
Yeah, I think there is always a danger for journalists, of course, because a by-election is a thing, and we have to talk about it, and so
we get far too excited about
and
this
so
stuff.
we're all there. We're going, if these trends continue, and we're sort of, what would it mean for a general election? By-elections are very odd beasts, right? They have, as you pointed out earlier, they have low turnout, which means it tends to be the more motivated section of the electorate that turns out, and they're quite different to if you had
normal people.
If you had an election where only people who were 10 out of 10 likely to vote voted, it would look quite different to one where up to 5 out of 10 likely to vote voted, and minor parties can concentrate their resources, and there's that effect. So I think that's fair. I think the important thing for Reform here, I don't think it's necessarily true that I think they could have won the seat. I think sometimes we're too deterministic about demographics. People are persuadable individuals, actually. But I do think,
a lot of it is getting the turnout.
Right. But I do think that it is significant, as you say, that they have maintained that vote share, a higher vote share than the Conservatives have ever got in this seat. It's quite clear that Reform, as a party of the right, can achieve a much higher result in bits of the country that have been shut the Conservatives out for a long time. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very viable alternative, you could say. Well, let's have a little listen to what Keir Starmer had to say a little bit earlier. Got a little watch and listen to Keir Starmer I bet he loved getting up this morning to this, didn't he? Having to kind of, explain away how we get to a situation where Labour's lost one of its safest seats.
Let's have a watch and a listen.
We were fighting two parties, Reform on the right with their politics of hatred and division, the Greens on the left with their politics of getting out of NATO in the middle of the conflict with Ukraine, of legalising all drugs, including heroin and crack cocaine, to give to adults. They are the extremes in politics. They can identify the grievances. It's only Labour that can unite the country and communities.
Well, he says there's only Labour that can unite the country and the communities, but it would apparently be the case that the voters don't think that.
I mean, I hate the word communities. Like, it's never people, it's never the community with a Y, right? Yeah. Unite communities.
Yeah.
It's just... really hate that modern
by definition politics. You're already saying it's sectarian because of different communities.
It's a very Ottoman approach to
These
politics,
are the same people,
right?
by the way, I would go at Margaret Thatcher for saying there's no such thing as society, they're just individuals, because the reality is people are just individuals.
There are lots of societies.
And then there's families, and then yeah.
They need to start using the society in the plural, right?
I'm going to start on I want to be a community leader for sort of stroppy middle-aged women. Come join me, people. Come join me.
A formidable...
Only women without a penis. I'm very strict on those
rules. A formidable
rules.
coalition that would be as well, right?
Well, Worcester Woman. Woman, won't we? I mean, seriously, we're going to decide all the elections from now on. Mark my words. 12:22 is the time. We're going to get to your calls up next. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, are taking that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:26 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch about anything you want to. You, as you know, you always get to choose, but let's face it, we're talking about the by-election results today, aren't we? Tracy is in Staffordshire and wants to have her say. Good afternoon to you, Tracy.
Good afternoon, Julia. I'd join your political party, I tell you.
Seriously, just in case you just tuned in, I'm going to be the community leader for stopping middle-aged women in their 50s.
That's me. Yeah, I'm with you there, girl.
We could win. We could win.
We could. To be honest, the women's vote is the bit that we need to engage in this country. The very fact that 53% of people couldn't be bothered to vote drives me nuts.
Yeah. Although the turnout in this by-election, by the way, was the same as the general election. So, I mean, their general election turnout was appalling.
Yeah. To me, decisions are made by those that turn up. You don't turn up, somebody else is going to. The thing that I find, it's driving me potty, is that women are being told how to vote. Women died to give me the vote.
Yeah.
Okay? The suffragettes went through all sorts, and we have got males in this country that think they can tell a female how to vote.
And we know, look, I imagine it is happening in some sort of, indigenous white British families or black Caribbean families, but we know there's a particular issue in communities that have come from the Indian subcontinent, it's not just Muslims, where there's just a hierarchy and the men decide these things, and that's the end of the matter.
Any woman, or alternatively, any male that is coerced into voting one way or the other just makes me so annoyed.
How do we stop it? We've had this report from these independent observers, and it's just been the local authority manager said no, didn't happen.
Right. Well, they know who those people are because they will have been ticked off at the polling station. They will have been ticked off to say who they are, so they actually know who it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And to be honest, if you are caught doing that, to me, you should lose your damn well bloody vote.
Well, there we go. Tracy, she's spoken. Yeah, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's go to Jason. He's on the line in Bradford. Hi, Jason. What do you want to say?
Oh, hi, Julia. I'm a big fan of yours.
You're very kind. I'm a big fan of yours. You called in.
Good. Well, I've got a couple of points.
Go for it.
Just first point, I was involved in politics in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And the family clan voting has been going on for decades. And I'm really surprised that the media is just picking up on this now. In the early 2000s, this was an issue. I'm from Bradford.
Yeah.
It's called the Bradderate vote in their communities, and this is a standard way of campaigning. So I'm just surprised that people are surprised.
I think people are aware of it. I think perhaps it's it's something else we've become aware of. Lots of it was been that postal voting where, you've got a tiny little house and there are apparently 28 people living there and their postal votes have all been handed in. You think, really? I mean, that's what was been happening in a lot of other areas, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I saw this in early 2000. I saw somebody walking from one of the main parties with a stack of postal votes as high as you could see.
Yeah.
And it was accepted. But the second point I want to make, Julia, is that I put a lot of blame on this election result on Reform, because they've effectively morphed into the Conservative Party now, bringing in the latest couple of defections. And let me tell you this, because I live in a working class community in Bradford, and I'll tell you something, that the Reform vote now is going down. People are looking forward now, thinking about Restore, because all the perception is now is that Reform is just another Conservative party.
I keep hearing this, but at the end of the day, Jenny, if you look at the results in that local by-election that we just had, I mean, I'm sorry, they don't even register. They don't even register as having got even a percentage of the vote. The reality is, we are talking about votes being split. It's like on the left, you've got Labour, you've got your Greens, there's Lib Dems, you've got the Your Party, you've got all these independents splitting the vote. And then on the right, if you've got Restore and Advance and Reform and the Tories, you're splitting the right. Well, be careful what you wish for, because at the end of the day, the policies being pushed by Restore and Advances are not going to win over 29% of the population. I'm not shouting for any particular party, but if your concern is having a certain kind of government or not having another kind of government, voting for a tiny party that's got under 0% of the vote isn't going to be a way of achieving it.
The reform now, their policies are basically the Tory. The Tory MPs they brought. Yes,
like what?
They are. Look at Robert Jenrick. He was the guy who put all the migrants into the hotels. He's now one of the big players in.
But he would say in his defence, he also resigned, having worked in the Home Office, and realised just how bad the situation was. He resigned over the Rwanda policy, saying it wasn't going to work. I mean, you know, he did put his job, I mean, you could say he was doing it with leadership, in a possible leadership challenge in the future, but in his mind. But I just don't. What policies do you want that reform aren't offering, that you think that Restore Britain and Rupert Lowe can deliver? When most people in this country, with all due respect to Rupert Lowe, a man I like and admire very much, most people haven't got a clue who he is. And if they do know him, they know him as a former football club owner.
Yeah, let me tell you what I think the problem is, Julia. The reform. I was a big supporter of reform. They had a big opportunity. They were leading in the polls. Mm-hmm. They had to be a party that's different. And instead of going down that road and being a party of new people of different policies, they just brought all the old people in from the Conservative Party.
They've had a few. They've had a handful of people. I mean, some of them I don't understand why they've taken Jake Berry, for instance, but some of them, you know, Suella Braverman. You could argue, you know, they've been kind of reform all along in terms of their party political views.
The two main ones, the Zahawi guy and Jenrick, they were the two. I was a reform supporter up until that, and afterwards I threw it in. And if you look at the polls, Julia, and I know you've done this as well. If you look at the polls after those two MPs joined, look at what happened to reform in the polls. Okay. I'm not saying that Restore is the answer, but what I'm saying is I don't think that reform is the answer now.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, then you're going to have a Labour government. There you go. Those are your options, mate. That's what I would say, Jason. So appreciate your call. Really interesting to hear that point of view. Thank you. Let's squeeze another call in really quickly. John is also in Bradford. Hello, John.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey, what do you want to say?
Right, I think the thing the reform needs to do now is to take a good look at themselves after this election and to look at some of their policies. I mean, I'm retired, right? I'm on a pension, and we've had an email from the Silver Voices, and they say that the Reform Party is going to repeal the 2010 Equality Act. Now, that means it's going to put people at a disadvantage, especially pensioners. It means that insurance companies can discriminate against
age discrimination is one of the things that I think that there's been quite a big debate. I mean, when I've actually seen Zia Youssef being interviewed about this and what they're going to actually repeal from it, it sounded to me like they're going to keep all of those protections. They want to repeal the parts of the Act which effectively say there should be in some way some promotion of, for instance, you know, having quotas for people of colour or quotas for people who are trans or quotas for women and things like that, as opposed to I believe, I may be wrong, not taking away the protections that it gives.
Well, I'm just saying that this email came back from Silver Voices. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that reform needs to understand is policy should come from down upwards and not up downwards. Okay. Because there's many people with lots and lots of experience. I have myself lots and lots of experience that could put ideas into the manifesto that people would accept. Okay. And I agree with what a lot of people are saying. Is I've been knocking at doors and I've been finding out. The people have been saying to me, there's too many people coming in from the Conservatives. There
seems to be a lot of people upset with that. I'm going to have to go. I've got to go to a very quick break, John. I so appreciate your call, John, Jason and Tracy. Lots more calls. I'm sorry I won't be able to get to all of them, but I so appreciate it. Could I take a quick break? And then we're going to be talking to Conservative peer Lord Kempsell. He's also publisher of Guido Fawkes about this election result and what's going on. What the hell is going on with the Chagos Islands? This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:37 is the time. Let's go to my next guest. He is Ross, now Lord Kempsell, Conservative peer, also publisher of Guido Fawkes. A very good afternoon to you, Ross.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Our older, longer-standing listeners and viewers will remember you're formerly of this parish, our former political editor. Great to have you on the show. I must first of all get your response to this Gorton and Denton by-election. What do you think it tells us about politics?
I think it's huge. I think it tells us that the next general election is going to be incredibly messy, that the vote is splitting and fracturing in many different directions to new parties, and that essentially politics is back. So I think it's good news for those of us who like to participate in understanding and debating these things. If it's on Talk or if it's following it on Guido, it's great news for us who like to get stuck in and talk about it. But in terms of being certain about the outcome, it's going to make things very difficult for the pundits and those who like to predict exact outcomes. I think that's out the window.
Well, I always think it's rather a good thing when everyone is kind of a floating voter, as I've been for many years, because actually it means that politicians actually have to, cater, instead of just taking someone for granted. Oh, well, I've got blue rosette on, you'll definitely vote for me, or red rosette, you'll definitely vote for me. They're actually having to go out and do what voters want them to do. Are you at all concerned, as a Conservative peer, and you worked in number 10 Downing Street for Boris Johnson, are you concerned about the Tory vote? I mean, it's literally the worst by-election result for the Conservatives pretty much ever, losing their deposit, for goodness sake. What does this say about Kemi Badenoch's leadership of the Conservative Party, which largely, I mean, we've certainly been saying here, she's really been stepping it up, but actually the Tories are not moving up in the polls.
It was going to be a tricky seat for the Tories, I think, on any calculation, because even in 2019, when Boris won a big general election victory, even in that seat, the Tories only got 8,000 votes. The Greens overturned a 13,000 Labour majority, which is an extremely impressive result by them. I can't say I'm massively surprised by the Conservative outcome. I think even in the 2024 general election, the Tories came fifth in that seat. Yeah. So it was always going to be tough for them. Now, having said that, do I think that the Conservatives are performing at the rate that they should be halfway through the Parliament? The answer is obviously the situation has changed, because there's now a competitive party on the right in British politics that the Conservatives are facing, and that just wasn't the case in previous elections. So it's something that the party needs to get its head around for sure.
Well, indeed. And let's also talk about something that you've actually taken a very special interest in the House of Lords, and actually been instrumental in getting a lot of information out with your questions to the government. And this is over the Chagos Islands. I mean, I think whenever we discuss this on air, we're all just sitting there going, how on earth did this even happen, this absurd deal where we give away territory we own ourselves and then pay to Mauritius, who've never owned it, and then pay them for the privilege of renting back the Diego Garcia military base? We've had Donald Trump and the White House and indeed the US State Department are sort of changing their mind, it would seem, week by week in terms of whether or not they support this absurd deal or not. But the latest is Donald Trump basically refusing to back the Chagos deal again unless the Prime Minister allows the US to use the islands to strike Iran. Tell us what's happening there, and tell us how much import the US view on this and Donald Trump's personal view on this is going to have on whether or not this deal goes ahead or not.
It's a really important military base on Diego Garcia, the joint US-UK air base there. And I think it is very relevant to the current US posture on Iran, because the Diego Garcia base is about 6 or 7 hours flight time away from Iran. So if the US was going to launch serious airborne military operations in that region, and this is the case we've seen Diego Garcia used, for example, in the invasion of Iraq, in the war in Afghanistan. The reason that the US wants to use that base is because it means it doesn't have to rely on its more politically sensitive bases in the rest of the Gulf. So the US has lots of air bases in other countries, in Gulf countries, but they prefer to use the Diego Garcia base because it's not so sensitive in those regional conflicts. So I think it is a factor. I've heard lots of the conversation and the callers on these issues around Chagos being completely confused by the fact that Starmer has prioritised this deal above almost anything else.
Because it's so mad. There must be something else. Like, what do we not know that we need to know about this?
I think there probably is something else going on that we haven't fully understood, and that's why I've been trying to dig into it. I mean, at a surface level, it's about things like Labour feeling that there's a colonial decolonisation case to solve there. Labour, for example, one of their former advisors was in the newspaper at the end of last week saying that it's all about Labour being afraid that there'll be a ruling by an international court saying that the UK needs to give up sovereignty. But the UK doesn't generally behave in that way anyway. There are lots of rulings against the UK or opinions against the UK in all sorts of international bodies that we ignore, like lots of other countries, including the United States. So it doesn't really make sense.
The International Court of Justice ruling that, again, it's an absolute joke of a court. It does, and in terms of who was on this court, it's advisory, not binding. And there are numerous different sort of get-out clauses, including for defence or for any other reasons, and our former Commonwealth countries and the like. So there's just simply no reason. We're told often this is all about, Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer as Attorney General and all of their mates from their barrister days, that this is just about this absolute belief in human rights. But of course, then we saw the Chagosians actually making their way to the islands and basically being told within hours, get your backsides off this island. They don't seem to care about their rights. If we're going to talk about human rights, surely the right of the Chagosians to return to the islands would be your number one consideration. Do we need to follow the money? We know that, Lord Hermer and Philippe Sands, another big mate of his, and the Prime Minister, human rights lawyers, and people always think human rights lawyers are people who do this stuff out of the goodness of their hearts. It's a very, very lucrative line of business for a lot of lawyers. Is there a money chain that we need to follow?
I'd be very interested to know whether there is. The money chain that I'm super concerned about is the money chain that's being dumped on the British taxpayer, because under the deal, which is going to cost up to £90 billion, which is an absurd sum. I mean, we throw these sums around, but £90 billion is a lot in UK government spending. That would materially put up the tax bill of British families by thousands of pounds a year, just to pay to lease back a base that we already own. It doesn't seem logical on any sort of value for money case, and it's the kind of spending proposal that under normal circumstances the Treasury would refuse it, because the government has these mechanisms inside the way that it spends money called spending controls, and usually a proposal like that, the Treasury would just say there's no way we're funding this. So something has happened to really push it through the system. In my experience of government, it's the kind of thing that you can only push through the system unless the Prime Minister personally is doing it. So I think the Prime Minister has probably been personally pushing this through. It is odd. Look, Keir Starmer visited Mauritius. That's been recorded in the public domain. Before he became an MP, the Times covered this story. He attended a legal conference there. He does know the Mauritian government personally. I'm not accusing him of any wrongdoing on that basis, but I think he needs to explain exactly what his relationship has been.
I've been to Mauritius, spent part of my honeymoon there, but I still don't want to give away the Diego Garcia base to them. I must ask you, as a peer, you work in Westminster, the Guido Fawkes site, publishing all the sort of the political exclusives. What do you make of the statue of Winston Churchill once again getting defaced with now this time pro-Palestine graffiti? 2020 we had Black Lives Matter putting racist on it. This is huge amount of red paint daubed all over Free Palestine, Zionist, war criminal, globalise the Intifada, which is a call to kill all Jews and take back Israel. Well, take back, they've never owned Israel, but also never again is now, which is particularly outrageous because that's actually, a slogan, a chant from Jews about not allowing things like October the 7th to happen or the Bondi Beach massacre to happen again, after the Holocaust. Why on earth is a statue of our greatest ever Prime Minister in a public place, surrounded by CCTV cameras, surrounded by police officers? How on earth is that able to be defaced like that?
I agree with you. I think it's offensive. I can see that the Met Police arrested somebody this morning, so they've taken some action there. And I think I just saw before joining you that the graffiti's now been removed. So that's good that at least that's been done quickly, because that's not always been the case in the past, by the way, when these things have happened in and around Parliament. So it is important, I think, that area in and around Parliament, because of its public significance, is actually properly looked after. I mean, Churchill stood against absolutely everything that graffiti, that offensive graffiti represents, because without him and his leadership, we wouldn't have the freedom to display any statues in public public at all. We wouldn't have the freedom to express any of these kind of views. So it's offensive, and it's a shame, because I think it highlights something today, which is a general concern about these kind of trends in society. And I know that's something you've been talking about,
absolutely.
but it's something that all of the parties on the right, they just need to get their heads together and think about this properly, I think.
Very interesting. I'd love to talk to you again. Lord Kempsall, Ross Kempsall, Conservative peer and publisher of the Guido Fawkes website there. Henry Hill, let's go back to what you had to say in terms of the Chagos Islands. It's interesting because that story just won't go away, and it is utterly, befuddling, I think, to the general public. Why are we giving it away? Why is this such a top issue? Why is this a hill to die on for this Prime Minister? And why are we giving money in the billions to a country totally beholden to China to rent back a piece of land, which is a military base that we need to use, Americans need to use, vital for our security, and for the privilege of using it even when we already own it? It's insane.
The whole thing is utterly mad on every level, because on the one hand, we're giving it away originally, frankly, because the US State Department pressured us to do it, because they wanted to pander to India, actually.
It's under Biden.
On anti-colonial grounds.
Everyone's claiming these pieces of land.
And then we, they're not to give it to India, but India's a Mauritian ally. But then, of course, we're going to be paying the rent for the Americans, because it's an American base. So you would think, at the very least, a British government with an ounce of spine would be like, well, fair enough.
But you pay for it.
But you're going to pay. But no. We're going to pay the rent for the American base. And this is the best bit. We're doing it up front. Right? So this big thing, most of it is cash up front, which means that actually Mauritius doesn't have all that much incentive not to renege on the deal later.
But again, this is a really, really simple thing. It's just like, it doesn't make sense. And when things don't make sense, there's always a reason we've not been told. I want to know what that reason is. 12:48 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We are going to have another little brief chat about those extraordinary election results from Gorton and Denton. We're also going to be talking about the terribly sad and upsetting news that Ian Huntley, the Soham killer, has been very seriously attacked in prison and is in critical condition. We'll talk to Mike Neville about that. This is Talk.
We genuinely are on resignation watch. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson, who faces a criminal investigation.
Can Keir Starmer survive the Mandelson scandal? We have breaking news for you. We've just been talking about, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff. We've now had another resignation from Number 10. And Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, Tim Allen, has now also resigned. The plot is thickening. The noose is tightening.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:51 is the time. Let's briefly turn our attention to another big story of, as well, in the last 24 hours. Broke it on the show just around this time yesterday in the news that the Soham killer, Ian Huntley, was in critical condition, remains in very serious condition after an attack in prison where he had to be airlifted to hospital after being ambushed at HMP Franklin. Let's talk about this with former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. That's Mike Neville. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Yes, good afternoon.
I've got to be honest with you, not sure anyone was shedding a tear for the plight of Ian Huntley, given what he did to little Holly and Jessica and why he's behind bars. But do we know anything more about this attack?
Well, we know that a man in his 40s has been identified. And I've got to say, firstly, Julie, that my sympathy goes out to Holly and Jessica's parents.
Exactly.
But what strikes me about this is just this week, on Monday, a man was sentenced for an attack in the same prison, HMP Franklin, for battering a man 4 times on the head with a hammer. So you've got to ask yourself, why is it in a place with dangerous criminals that they can get a hold of iron bars and hammers? Well, I mean, in my view, Huntley should have hanged, and I volunteered to be the hangman. However, if nothing else, he should be in a dungeon with bread and water, and once every day a priest or a vicar visits him, and so he has some sort of he can learn about the Bible or something. And that should be all his life is. The idea that this man has a PlayStation and all these privileges will disgust people. And it just shows that the prison service is in chaos. That one, we give all these mad privileges to people, that things that when I was a young soldier you wouldn't have even had.
Yeah.
And secondly, we allow them to be in places where they can have the most dangerous items.
And that's when we're keeping them behind bars and not releasing them by accident. I mean, that's the thing. Apparently, he suffered horrific head injuries in the assault. He was allegedly attacked with a spiked metal pole 6 times in a prison workshop. And again, you say, like, what the hell were they doing with those sort of tools? It's the 3rd time that Huntley has been attacked by fellow inmates. We've seen attacks on, again, anyone accused of, found guilty of killing children, hurting children. We often see this is the case after prisoners have been murdered. But it's important for people to remember, I mean, those people who were lucky enough not to remember this, back in 2002, he was sentenced to life for murdering 2 10-year-old girls. We mentioned them already, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, at his home in Soham. And basically, you know, he was the caretaker at their school. And he'd done interviews, and his then partner as well, done interviews with the police. They did interviews with the media. You know, butter wouldn't melt in their mouths. But actually, he had murdered the girls in cold blood. And it's just such a horrific crime. And it was front page news an awful lot. And again, we wrote the story on the show yesterday, and there were 3 of us in the studio, and we all just went, oh, well. Now, we don't have capital punishment in this country, and we don't have a situation where other prisoners are allowed to physically attack a prisoner they consider to have committed a worse crime than them. But what will happen to the prisoner who has been identified as the person who carried out this attack?
Well, there'll be a full police investigation. All the forensic evidence will be gathered. There's no doubt lots of CCTV and all the prison officers who are witnesses. But it is like this case. It was Damien Bendall who was sentenced on the 23rd. For the hammer smashing a guy in the head 4 times. Yeah. He got another life sentence. But what do these life sentences mean, Julie? You know, like 14 years or something? Yeah. These creatures sort of are then let out. It's just absolutely terrible. And the other thing with Huntley, of course, is he's an arrogant, horrible man. He is, as well as being a wicked child murderer. He was wandering around the prison, apparently, in a red look-alike Manchester United top, which, of course, is an iconic image of the 2 girls, Jessica and Holly, wearing their Man United tops. And so he's winding up other violent prisoners, and in essence, he's just deserves.
Well, I have to say, why isn't he in prison uniform? You do just wonder what the hell is going on in our prison system right now. Mike Neville, thank you for joining us. Former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville there. Henry Hill still with me. I mean, the story, you know, look, people have got the punishment is being kept behind bars, not risking your life every single day. But there's clearly something going horribly wrong in our prisons at the moment, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Our prisons are in an absolutely awful state and have been for some time. And essentially the problem is that during one of the worst decisions George Osborne made during the austerity period is he decided to pay off all the experienced prison officers
Because it costs too much.
Right. Immediately realised, well, a year or two when standards collapsed, that they needed to hire new people, but all of that institutional experience was gone. And so now prisons are stuck, right?
With a bunch of people with 2 years' experience on low pay.
And so if they let people out, they risk these attacks happening. If they don't, a lot of prisons end up with prisoners inside their rooms 23 hours a day, which is not how it's meant to work. And those people go insane.
Yeah,
and
I mean, we all would, yeah, exactly. Let's return to the subject of the day, and that is the by-election result, Gorton and Denton. Your big takeaway, I mean, I asked you, the first question I asked you at 10 o'clock was, what does this tell us about British politics? The question we've been asking our audience, people coming back about, reform, Labour's chance of... I think we're all in agreement, Keir Starmer's a goner on, by the 10th of May, after the local and Scottish and Welsh elections, and after this, he's not a vote winner. They're like, Kemi Badenoch, does she survive?
I think Kemi is expectation managing really well, but if there's another round of locals like last year's, where there are now counties with more Tory MPs than Tory councillors, that might be the limit. That
might be the... And in terms, Lib Dems didn't get a look in on this one, but the Green Party, are they the insurgent party on the left? Is that a big threat to Labour, whoever is leading them?
It is a big threat to Labour. It's not necessarily an existential threat the way the Reform is to the Tories, but they do threaten Labour in those urban seats, those student seats, where no other party has threatened Labour before, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Again, the key thing for me is we're actually going to have some scrutiny of the Green Party. People need to know what parties stand for, because, OK, fine, the Greens. Yeah. Barely mention any Green policies, barely mention at all. If you want to know a few more details, do read my column in the Sun newspaper today. You can find it online as well. Again, I call them basically communists on ketamine, because I think that is what they are. Anyway, it's been fantastic having you join us at Whole Show. Henry Hill, thank you very much for all that analysis. Ian Collins is here right now and tell us what's happening on his show.
We are obviously awaiting the result of the Gorton and Denton by-election. We'll be bringing that
he's always up to date with the latest news, people.
This afternoon. Smart money is on Sir Oinkalot, apparently.
Do you know what? I had to read out when we discussed the by-election and what was going on a couple of days ago, and I had to read out all the candidates' names, and I could never make it through.
I know, and I remember there's been some crackers over the years. Yeah, I think Sir Elvis Presley is abreast. I think was one of them.
Genuinely, one of the greatest things about our British politics is having the Monster Raving Looning Party doing.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Because they kind of take the mick, and politicians need to be mocked, and having to stand there. Remember Theresa May standing there next to Lord Buckethead? It's the greatest.
But that's the greatest thing about it.
But mocking politicians is an important part of our politics.
We can do that. We're going to be focusing on all of that. I mean, forget free Palestine, free radiators, by the looks of things, going to everyone in that constituency, courtesy of a plumber that just got herself elected over there. It's a big result for them. Of course, what does it mean in reality? I thought it was interesting that the communist guy came last, but actually the communist candidate came first as well.
Well, exactly.
So if you look at what's being promised here, interesting.